Alexa, turn off the light. Okay, let's get some natural lighting in here. Work out today. Work out. Work out. Boom, 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 bam, 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 bam. Where did my other thing go? I don't even see it anymore. There she goes. Good morning. Well, I'm going to be as gentle as possible this morning because I'm going to have to assume that many people are going to be disappointed by the pre-market action after seeing it rip yesterday. I bet you're not, are you, Booksy? You big old fat bear. I'm not happy, but I'm not happy either at the same time. Does that make sense? Like, I'm kind of just indifferent. So, because how do I put this? I don't know. Maybe I should it's probably better just to say nothing about it, right? So here's my thoughts, okay? And you're not going to like what I have to say if you're kind of miffed this morning. First of all, I don't think that what we saw in that pre-market action, post-aftermarket action, pre-market action is all that surprising. Because yesterday when it broke to the upside, I genuinely was just kind of like concerned. Like, it didn't seem right to me. There was like, outside of GME just having kind of a squeeze moment, like it does. It's, an AMC kind of playing the sympathy card. Just didn't really seem like there was any real reason. Like, I was looking back at the chart after the close and I was like, I don't really get it. There was a really tiny, micro kind of a support found, but I mean, for this kind of a level breakout, you want more, like, even if this had come up and opened way up here, like, I would have wanted it to come back down and find support here again, because this is such a tiny little support. And I don't feel like we were in the same situation we were in back here, where kind of all the rocket fuels poured in all at once. The volume on AMC just does not indicate that to me, like, just yet. And yeah, so I don't know, man. I'll tell you this much though, like, so from a technical perspective, I think what I posted is basically that I was just concerned that it was going to just dump again, because and a few other people said the same thing, like, well, you never know, because sometimes it pumps in after hours and then dumps in pre-market, and you just don't know until you get there. And yes, there was a GME dilution announcement, kind of like a pre-earnings thing, and it's hard to predict those kinds of moves, but I'll just say this, that like, everything happens in the market in a very particular way for very particular reasons. Actions and reactions. So just take it for what it is, Don't worry too much about whether you got it perfect or not. I'm bummed if you're opening with a loss here, but it is a gap down. So, we might get a little early morning rally, before any kind of continuation. So unfortunately, you know, most people are missing this action here. I don't think, looking back at it, that it looks like a complete and total breakdown just yet. And I can't really use regular trading hours for this. For obvious reasons, there's not really like a creek there to talk about in regular trading hours that, you know, makes a lot of sense. But this to me would be like your support here. So if I had to give you like my 2 cents about it, I'd say we probably come back up here, gap fill, and then maybe continue down. Now you're probably wondering, why not just gap fill and continue running and go back up to the same price? It's not impossible, and we can keep that in mind when it gets back up to this top area. We're really just looking at, I mean, if you look at it without extended hours on and you didn't see that move, you would have just expected that this is just a UT kind of motion or a backup motion. So meaning like this was just an up thrust that failed, and then this is a backup to the creek. It's not that complicated looking. So remember that extended hours is important. It matters, and especially if there's high volume, it's not like it doesn't matter. But at the end of the day, like regular trading hours, they play by their own set of rules. So you have to make sure that you're paying attention to like, okay, well, what's happening in the regular trading hours without all that stuff? What really happened here is basically just a gap down. So like, frustrating as it might be for those that wanted to capitalize on that upside, what I'm saying is there might still be an opportunity this morning to do that if we head back up. We should head back up, I think, to get the gap. I don't think we're just going to leave it and dump. The only reason we might do that is kind of a breakaway the other direction. So if you were to look at, and we're about to open and find out, but if you were to look at the extended hours, like if there was enough volume in that drop to just have continuation in the morning, but I suspect that's not the case. So we can recap this motion, and I want to talk about this because this is a really cool example of an M cross that didn't even venture into the realm of bearish, except for that one little like question mark up thrust that happened here. And by the end of the day, I was like, by the end of the stream yesterday, I was like, well, I don't really know. You know, maybe it's a, yeah, I don't know. I just said, I don't really know. Maybe it's a, maybe it's fine because it just double topped. But, yeah, so we're just going to wait. We're going to wait on 530. Probably going to find support and head back up real first thing this morning. And then we'll see what happens. So Booksy, you're constantly, yeah, it's gonna kind of wick around this parallel. That's fine. Once it gets above this parallel, so if it gets above, I think it probably will, 545, you're probably gonna have a pretty good chance that you make some good money on that if you're playing back to the upside. So you're not going to want to hear my what my positions are right now. If you're really bullish, you're probably like, how in the world could you have possibly known? This is where people accuse you of being like a hedge fund person or something. Well, let me tell you, there was a lot of indication yesterday that this should have been topping here. There was a lot of overbought time frames. I mean, all the way up to 3 hour, I think it was getting overbought. 4 hours, really close. You had a lot of divergence on RSI from these two peaks. That doesn't usually bode well. Like, so traditionally, if you get a lower RSI on a higher push with less volume, it's obviously bearish. In this case, there was more volume, so I was kind of like, I don't know. And then we did get the advance yesterday, so you're like, well, this could still be an SOS with a backup, technically, right? And that's kind of where I'm at this morning. It's like, I'm not really sure what happens first thing this morning, but I know that ultimately, like, what we want to see is some kind of a support. Okay, so like no matter what happens, if this gap fills and continues, or if it doesn't continue and it heads back down, which is just the little doodle I made, it doesn't really make any difference to me, because this could be just a backup to a creek. One of the bigger concerns right now is, like, if you were to come up and reject, this has now made a striking new low. So at this point, you're looking at this like, you know, from the point of view of a trader, as like, well, you know, how do I know if this is gonna continue down or continue up? And just keep it simple, because there's not really going to be an easier way to do this morning than just drawing a simple trend. So we're going to watch that gap and see if it fills. If it doesn't fill, we'll just mark it off. We'll see what happens. I suspect it will fill, and then I still think we're going to head down. There was a dilution announcement on GME. The Roaring Kitty stuff's happening in a couple hours. I'm not going to be streaming while he's streaming, because I don't think anyone wants to watch Booksy while he comes on. So if it's legit, then I think everyone will probably want to watch it and see what happens. So AMC's down 7% this morning, just kind of chopping around that 530 mark. We never got support here yesterday. After the stream ended, I said that if it, you know, you watch these like hooking actions and all this junk, I had it set up, and basically I said, you know, if it comes back up and you have a support, you're probably going to go, and it just went. You know, I wasn't even watching the stream by that point. I had just watching the stock. I mean, I had just kind of left. I was going to hang out with my son for the afternoon, and so when I got back, I saw this motion here, and I noticed that it had kind of hit 570, but I wasn't really sure why we were like rocketing. And I went over and looked at GME, and I was like, well, maybe that was it, you know, because this little wick down has a low of, it's very, very small. This has this little candle right here. The last candle of the day has a bottom at 570. So it found support like last minute on the top. And it's very unusual for AMC to do this kind of stuff this quickly. FFIE is crossing 66 cents. So it's just kind of a strange motion. Like, I didn't really feel like there was a whole lot here to go off of. I mean, it's a high volume top. Kind of looked like could be bullish. There really wasn't anything here that looked bearish. Again, like I didn't really witness the action itself. I just came back later and saw the price action, and I was like, well, it didn't really do anything super bearish here. It kind of came back to that parallel, hit it, came back up, dipped down, found support again at 570. But there also really wasn't anything to indicate that this was just about to explode. And then I looked at the RSI, and I was like, I don't really get it, you know. And that's the summary of my thoughts on that, like yesterday. So it looked like it broke to the upside. It looked like it was going up to a potential SOS. I didn't feel like the SOS was confirmed enough in my mind. Like, and if you're just playing the last 15 minutes of the day, that's kind of a strange time to just assume that it's going to continue up. So I didn't really have any kind of a signal in my mind like, oh, it's definitely going to go up to near $7. Yesterday after the pop, I went back and I just redid the fibs on this to see where the retracement were, and it was really coasting for quite a while around 616, which is the 382. And then it ultimately came pretty high, nearly to, as y'all know, nearly to 7, and that's the 0.5. So like, if we were to get some kind of a reaction really high today, I don't think it's entirely inappropriate to think 698 might be like a reasonable level, but based on the GME news, based on everything else going on, I just kind of have to look at it very simply. And I looked at the RSI this morning. I was like, well, there's the cat ear, which is kind of it's distributive action, but it's already sort of come down to the bottom. So like, this is just a 15-minute RSI, right? It's not the end all be all. So for me, I'm like, well, what I'd be waiting for then is on RSI, again, is I'd be waiting for some kind of a reaction back up, perhaps to a hooking action of some kind here before any kind of a definite like downward continuation or upward continuation. Like I'd want to see how it interacts with that general trend that we had. So you can use either the moving average or you can use the regular old RSI. It's about the same. So roughly this pocket area right here. And that matters because even in a distribution, even if you don't get the hook that you see here visually, you're like, I don't know where the heck that would be, right? Because I don't see the same visual thing right here. Even if you don't get that visually, I guess it would be like this. It's kind of weird though. Like somehow like right around that flat area. Maybe. I don't know. We'd have to do it without extended hours on. But even if you don't get it visually up here, a lot of times on RSI, you'll still get the action. So, makes sense. So, gap's about to be filled. We're up to 565. So GME was down quite a bit this morning, down to like 36. It's coming back up. It's almost back up at 44 again. This was another comparison I did yesterday. I was looking at this setup, and technically it already pushed above this top one. So either my parallels are wrong or it's just already advanced a little bit, in which case you might just see it advance, you know. But they released earnings early. It's kind of a double miss here. Not a huge miss, really not that big of a deal in a lot of ways. But then, of course, they announced the share offering. So, yeah. But this is kind of what I was seeing, was that there's this triple up thrust on GME. And it's push, push, push. GME's at 44 right now. AMC's at 575. So AMC came back above the 570 mark. So it should be filled now, or pretty close to filled. I forgot to check the closing price, but I think it's basically gap filled at this point. Lots of volume on that push. So we'll see. It may have continuation. High volume push here first thing. Yeah, it's looking like we might see it try to get back up to that same mark we were at maybe during pre-market after hours. So now we're positive on the day. We're at 580. It's still pushing. This looks like a pretty classic little bottom here. M cross, higher lows, and then it pushed. Nothing particularly negative about that. It is kind of a throwback to where we were on. It definitely is a throwback. It's like a double bottom. So low here was 496, and this low is 497. So it came 1 penny lower. We'll see. Just kind of wait it out. I'm not really feeling any particular way this morning. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot to talk about with any kind of move like this. And the expectations are often that you're going to come all the way back up to the top or something. And I don't think that's completely wrong. Like there's a Fibonacci level up here. There's also one at 616. That might hit a different kind of a target, you know, and we talk about these like meaning like there's like a lot of these parallels, and I haven't really talked about those in a little bit, but these rising parallels. And yesterday during the after hours session, we jumped over one of those parallels, and that 616 is kind of like right on it. So if you're using extended hours, that Fibonacci retracement is kind of right along that parallel. So that's something that I would think about because it matters. This line right here, it's a little weird, but it basically is a trend line that sort of defines this top area. I think it's sort of a whip around type deal, so I would have expected this to be like a 50-50 move. And it pretty much is perfectly 50-50 around this center mark. I drew this using the regular trading hours and came back to extended hours yesterday and looked at it. And this is one that, if you go back to the bottom here, you can see that this is sort of the last trend. I don't really know if there's a term for that in traditional trading, or in any kind of like Wyckoff or whatever, but there should be, you know, if there isn't. There should be a term for that because the concept in that is that you have... I don't really know exactly how to describe this, but it seems like it applies all the time. And I guess what it is and what we're seeing is kind of like when you're at the top, and we're still pushing, we're at 593. I guess it halted. That's what it looks like. Yeah, unfortunately it halted right on that line. So that kind of makes me a little nervous that they're going to just dump it. It looks halted to me. Yeah, I think it's not moving. So that makes me a little nervous because it's kind of like right on the center mark. That's not, I don't think that's an accident. That's a really nasty little whip around, huh? So anywho, I think what we're seeing is kind of like when you're at the top and it creates that like last creek, you know, and there's often like a really strong trend, like right before you turn down, you know, and it ends up establishing the main kind of price action swings that you may have. And then we always look for the other one, which is kind of like that cross trend. I don't even know where it is on this guy. Maybe like here or something like that. It's way back here. Anyways, which defines kind of the sine wave action. So I think that's what this is. This is sort of like a last trend, and then this ends up being like a really clean whip here around that trend. So it is important. So I may not have marked it off thinking that this was going to be exactly what it is, but right now, like in relation to the current move today, but I always try to mark it off if we move up really high away from that last trend. I always think about that. And that's really important to note because like we're looking at like GME and stuff and AMC, those last trends are pretty low. Like GME's last trend down here, I've got it marked off. It's really far. Like it's really far from where we are. If we were to try to head back down to that last trend, I mean, it could take a month plus. So, and then AMC is the same way, although I'm not showing that here. It's the same way. It has a trend that's like super low. So it's always important to me like to mark off that kind of last little trend that you see. And oftentimes that last downward trend too. Yeah, I guess we're just halted, so we'll just chill for a minute. We can look at GME maybe. So the price comparison I made yesterday, oh yeah, I guess I could disclose to you, if it doesn't make you too angry, what I did yesterday, you're going to call me a bot or something. I actually exited my long positions. There we go, unhalted and dumped a little bit. I actually exited my long positions yesterday before close, and I actually had a hedge position that I exited this morning for a profit. It's not that I thought it was necessarily going to drop. I had a small hedge position because I didn't know if this was going to do that cat ear thing we talked about on stream yesterday, where you get the upthrust and then the secondary upthrust and then come down. So for me, it was more of like a cautionary thing, right? And I exited first thing because it was in the money or it was profitable, and I'm not going to just sit on it because I don't know what's going to happen here. If it comes back down again, I do think we're going to go back down to 430s, at least 460, because this is your really like your long-term like creek and support back here, like 460 now, right here. So in my mind, yesterday was so uncertain, and I didn't like the way it was like kind of ending. So before too much happened, and it was before the close, I'd come back, I was like right around here. I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen. And I don't really like where we're sitting with RSI and everything. Maybe we go up today and we just keep ripping. But in my mind, I'm like, that seems like it's kind of enough. I don't know. And when GME was kind of ripping, I was like, well, it came to a natural sort of stopping point. So I had these parallels drawn on both AMC and GME, and GME came to the stopping point I thought it would. Now, did it go beyond it in, after hours price action? Yeah, I mean, it actually went above, I think, this 64.22 top. So I had no idea what today was going to be like. I didn't know if we would wake up and have this still way up here, or if it was going to reverse and come back down. I didn't like the overall picture that I was seeing for either stock, really. So that's why I went ahead and dipped out of those long positions. This is not necessarily going to end bearish, y'all. So you need to understand, like, this for me was a strategic play based on my uncertainty. And had we woke up this morning and it had rocketed to even farther, it would have just been my loss, right? So you make those calls and you make a decision, and then you stick with it or you don't, right? But I felt pretty confident about my uncertainty. So that's it. That's all I could say about that. That's where I'm at right now. I'm currently not sitting in any real contracts or anything. So I'm not playing anything right now. So I'm just going to wait. Even if this comes up, if it breaks above here, I might be a little more bullish. Might play a swing and see if it can get up to 616 and then $7. But for now, that halt was right on that midline. So I don't know what to make of that. Kind of makes me think they're trying to stop it right there. Let's get off extended hours for just a minute. So it's pushing this kind of micro creek from extended hours. But I want to see it without extended hours. I want to see regular trading hours. Yeah, let's see what's going on here. So yeah, I mean, it could just be like an SOS with a backup. It's sort of similar, like similar kind of breakout levels. So basically, if it just comes above the previous top, I'd be pretty bullish, because I think this could be an SOS with a backup and then just continue. And then if it were to go back down, so I might swing that, because that might be a really good swing trade today, this morning. I mean, you could have swung the gap and you would have done pretty well. But in terms of like continuation here, I'm looking for something pretty specific. I'm looking for this to push up, hold high, have a support above 6 basically, and then go. And anything less than that, like coming up and dropping back through, or just not even advancing, I'm going to be leaning a little more bearish this morning. I think this is okay as just like a backup to the creek. So that's why I'm saying it's still not really bearish. This push up did come higher than this top. So it has to make a decision now about direction. I might even just do like a straddle here, because I think it's going to move hard either way. It looks like it's rejecting off of that. It doesn't mean anything just yet. The rejection's obviously not positive. Because it came higher, came back down, and then rejected on the creek, that's typically not good. But you'd still want to wait and see if it makes a higher high or higher low here. As soon as it makes a lower low, it's probably gone. So that's, again, down here. So it's decision time, basically. Why not just chop here and end the day at 550, Booksy? Well, we might. I would just say, like, at this point, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Like, if I'm looking at this as a white coffee and trader, because it's trying to do an SOS at the top, and now within that SOS, it just pushed the local creek and then dropped back beneath, and before that had come down low. It's just basically done a double flush. So I don't think it's very likely you just sit here and chop. Like, it just tested the low, it did a backup, and then it went up and pushed above the top of the creek locally. There's really nothing else to say other than that usually means you're about to change direction. Like, we don't typically do that kind of stuff and then just sit still. And, you know, the key word there is typically. But I mean, I'm looking at that like that halt happened right on the midline, and then it dropped back beneath this creek, and it broke both of these. So if we're looking at this as a cross, that's what you would look at. This typically looks distributive to me if it pushes high and then comes back down. But if it finds a higher low, kind of like what happened with GME, you could have this kind of advance early and then form a bigger range. This is what happened with GME like yesterday or the day before. So who knows? Right? So anywho, I was saying maybe straddle here. So I might do some June 21st stuff. We'll see. I might just do it manually because I have an idea of what I want to do. Anyways, GME is down 14%. It's at $39. This to me looks like a top, but I'm not going to go much further than that. I posted yesterday a chart that was sort of like a workout, and this is sort of the estimated date if you look at the timing of this previous reaccumulation. So assuming it did reaccumulate here, you can see that 382 is $28. It makes some sense because it looks really similar. There's obviously like a triple top action here, like a triple push action. And the same kind of thing occurs here. You can see it's like basically like a giant secondary distribution action. But then if it catches, that's where you can start a reaccumulation. So this would basically be the top of a new range at 47. And I think it looks really similar to what we saw in the setup in the January move for AMC. And I think it's possible that we can see something really similar. So at lowest, I would say 23 is fine. And then I would look at that 382, the $28 mark, that 382 is actually like a 50% retrace to the upside. So if you were to look at this from the reverse point of view, you'd see like, oh, it matches the 50% retrace. So if you were going to look at this as like a play, you would look at this and say, well, it's a 50% retrace down to 28. So basically roughly $29 is kind of where I'm seeing GME as likely to go. And I don't think it's going to get there overnight necessarily, but I think that it chops a little bit and then heads down. That's my assertion about that. And then AMC, I think it's more likely going to be I should have just held on to those positions. They went bloated up this morning, didn't they? Yep. So, it's okay. I guess you're like, what are you whining about, Booksy? I'm just talking to myself. Don't worry about it. So yeah, I'd be looking at this as like nothing particularly horrible just yet, but watching very carefully and just seeing what happens here right around 570. If we get a rejection here at 570 and then we start to a new low, that's to me like the big uh-oh kind of moment, and you're probably going to head low. And by low, I mean at least down, I think, to this 475 area, maybe then 460 very quickly. So, fun stuff, right? This is nobody wants to be the guy in the room who's the bear, but here I am. It's not because I want AMC to go down, and you have to understand, like, there's still a possibility this goes up today. Like, we get back above that $6 mark, it's probably going to just fly, you know. You could have a redistribution back above 592 at this point, maybe even slightly above to like 6, but you can't get up there and find support and then not expect to just rock it, you know, and that's where I would be. So if I'm looking at this as trends and as trajectories, this kind of already looks like it made it to where I would expect it to go. We talked about it yesterday. Like, there was a lot pointing to like 575, maybe not much beyond that. And then Fibonacci wise, you have retracements that go pretty far. And this is where I'm kind of not sure, because GME actually did a 618. We were looking at it just a minute ago. It came all the way up really high to like $40, and it ended up pushing to nearly that 48, which is the 786 retracement to the upside of that pullback move. So like, it's kind of where it, you know, again, it's like really similar to the setup that we had on AMC in January, and that's why I did the comparison. And even the RSI here looks like it's in a similar situation. Trends for that, it's just simple stuff. It's going to take a minute. This may not be like an immediate move down or anything like that. You can start looking at the shorter term moves, and if it holds, then, you know, you're obviously going to be more bullish. If it doesn't hold, you might be a little more bearish. The Roaring Kitty stuff's set to happen at like 11, so I'll be off before then. Yeah, so we're pretty close to this first kind of sideways break here, if we do break. You sound like a bear, Booksy. It's like you're talking about downside only. Look, I'm telling you what I think is going to happen, so I'm not going to tell you what I don't think is going to happen. But if it does happen, and I think what we did basically yesterday was go up and fill that gap or get close enough to it, and then this is like a 786 retrace. I think at this point it makes more sense, just from a trading standpoint, if you're going to have a big advancement later, to go ahead and do a reaccumulation here. And the way that it's marked off makes me think that reaccumulation happens in this vicinity. that I was talking about earlier, between like 28 and 40. That's what my TA is leading me to believe, is that we probably have a 28 to 40 reaccumulation, and then we might have a big continuation after that point. What would change that would be any kind of a major break in an SOS. So like at this point, if we broke this, right, from these peaks, I think at that point you're going to look for an SOS. So like if it, let's say it came down and it did go down to like 28 or came down to like 33, and then it pushes out above again back to 40 and comes up to 48, and then you get a little SOS motion, kind of like we did here, then yeah, I'm like pretty darn bullish, you know, at that point. But for now, it's kind of just a matter of opinion. So like nothing I say at this point has real confirmation just yet, you know. And we saw this kind of price action, this kind of crazy chop right here as well. You know, this is very similar to what happened yesterday. Remember when this pushed up and then it came back down, you know, and I said, well, technically it doesn't look great, but it didn't push over the top. We have the same kind of action here, right? It's a bit of a reverse order though. So this actually came down first, then up. And this actually went up first, then down. So maybe that's the difference between an accumulation and a distribution in this case. I don't really know, you know. I can't really say for sure, but so I'm going to re-enter a hedge position, and then I'm going to play bullish if it comes back up above 6 and holds. I'm going to do a trade there. And everything else today, I'm probably just going to sit on my hands about. I could go into some other stocks and talk about some craziness like that happened on NU. That was crazy. That's a big move right there. MPW gapped down this morning, so it's not looking too hot. It's unfortunate because, again, like it's starting to look more like a double top, right, than a actual big move, but it did fill the gap. So much like everything else, it could have some pullback time and reaccumulation time. There's a lot of space here between 550 and 505 on MPW. The creek is real low, so it really could have a full retracement back down to 5, and it could still be bullish in that regard. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, this could be an SOS locally, but have a backup. And I'm kind of seeing that as a market-wide standard right now. We already knew that this is almost exactly what happened, but it wasn't that hard to predict because you have a setup here that it's going into a Friday. You've got FOMC coming up next week. You have max pain on IWM at 202. You know, you could see the reaction move happen. You could see the build up on RSI that looks like it's kind of trying to turn, but there could be a possible drop down. And that was kind of what I said yesterday, is like you could see this thing come up and then drop back down pretty easily. It does look like a head and shoulder, but I think it's rising, and there's a danger to that because as a head and shoulder, it could always go low, right? And this could end up being a little head and shoulder action that drops down. But I think at this point, it did already kind of drop it pre-market. You can see here it went real low, wicked back up. So I think what we're seeing right now is we're seeing like a decision moment of, are we going to hold it or not? Because I think if we hold 202 into FOMC, maybe the volatility crashes it down to 200, and that's right where it's targeting. I mean, if you look at some of the major trends here and parallels and creeks and junk, it really looks to me like a flag, and it looks like it's targeting potentially that 200 level. I would not be surprised if they start talking and there's a drop down to 200, and then we actually become bullish again and move all the way back up. That would not surprise me. It would lose this local flag upward, this local trend upwards. So that's also important to think about, because if it broke down and then it broke down 200, then you're talking about potentially coming all the way back down pretty low to like 190s. So charge point actually had a double beat. Somebody mentioned yesterday that now it's like switched to a buy or something like that. I mean, whatever, right? We don't know if this is still going to hold. It could still have a sell down to retest that floor, but I don't know, man. We liked it before it was cool to like it, so whatever. I don't know. It's been a while since it's had a real positive beat, so on the whole, I don't think ChargePoint's made the same kind of moves that GME and AMC have made. You can see it hasn't, in this sort of shallowing bottom area, it has not had a big push yet, and it has potential to go up to, in my opinion, like it has potential to go up to like that 350 pretty easily. So, you know, this was sort of my estimation of possibility. Do I think it's still going to come back down? Not necessarily, but I think this is just sort of was like a general kind of vibe that I had about it, like that you'd have this kind of a slow burning turn. And I might even get rid of this stuff now. It's kind of confusing. But going into November, my expectation was something like that. So I still think we're going to be up here at 350 before too long. It does look like a gigantic inverted head and shoulder, so that could be part of that price action. AMC is still chopping. It's at 555. We'll see. You know, if those buy orders or those sell orders get eaten up here, we might try back towards this top creek again. Right now, all I'm seeing is kind of a rejection after rejection after rejection. So again, we made a new low, and then I know that happened after that crazy push to the high. I get that. But that push to the high ultimately distributed during pre-market. Okay, so that was already in a sell-off mode. It opens low, and then you get a reaction for the gap. But instead of just filling the gap, it actually went beyond, and it pushed higher than the previous top here, and it pushed above the creek. So when you look at this kind of motion right here, that's a really pivotal motion for the stock. Like, stocks don't typically jump their creeks and push to a higher high after making a lower low, unless it's what? Like a spring, right? And if it does do that, that's typically not a great sign. However, you might say, well, couldn't that just be an auto reaction and then a phase B bottom and a phase B top? And the answer is yes. And the reason for that is because it didn't push above the buying climax. So in this case, the reason I said it's not all lost is because even though it did push above the previous top, which in and of itself is kind of distributive, it did not push above the top of this range. So there's always a possibility, and you want to just call it that. You don't want to say it's a certainty because the range hasn't quite finished yet. But there's always a possibility that it could come back up later, maybe over here, late in the day and rally. That being said here, and what I see is a wick that basically establishes a new creek here. It also hits the previous downtrend. So we've busted over that level, right? We never made a new high. Then it came back down and it rejected the creek. So it pushed up, came back down, came back up after kind of pushing back down through 570. And that's not a good sign either because it's not really holding that high support. And then it rejects, right? And then you see the secondary rejection is followed by a third rejection, which is basically the cross, and that's the uptrend here. So the only two real low wicks we have from the price action yesterday, that's your wedge, right? It's rejecting that uptrend. So then the resulting action is usually going to be a sell down from that. So what you're waiting to see now is you're waiting to see if this was a sign of weakness. You're waiting to see if it can make a new low, and you really want to see if it can hold previous support levels, such as this guy at like 540, 539 or something like that. That's like right here. And if it can't hold that, which is one of those parallels we've been talking about that I've been doodling these kinds of things based on the structural elements that we've seen previously in these runs. That's the only reason I'm doing it, you know, and because I think that they're there. And they are, I think. You can see them laying up on them. I think that's a really important element to this. So I'm keeping that in mind, that if it holds above here, not only is that a higher high, or excuse me, a higher low from this previous action, but it also then means we've jumped a parallel and we've tested it twice, really 3 times, because you can see we tested it yesterday and then we went below it and then we came back up. So this would be a pretty complex bottoming action. If it's establishing a new bottom here and shaking out sellers, this would be a very complex bottoming action. It's very strange because of the almost like quadruple thrust we had, and it's not normal for AMC to do that on like an SOS. But AMC does have very often these crazy high volatility bottoms. So if it's or tops rather, both. So if it's establishing, like we get a lot of big shakeouts at the top and the bottom before a direction is picked, and that's like that for a lot of stocks. But AMC tends to be really crazy. Like this kind of crap happens all the time. And so when I look at this, I'm like, all right, well, if it is a top, it's going to be a brutal top, because I think that the resulting action here takes you down pretty far. And a lot of folks were probably thinking max pain at 450, no way we're going to get back there, but this could be a very efficient way to drop the price really low. Maybe not to 450, but I do think you could get pretty darn close to that area between 450 and 5, if that's the goal. So here's what I'm looking for as a bear in this case. I'm looking for this to drop. And if I'm bullish, what I want to look for is I want to look for this guy, this creek, this downward motion to be defeated, basically. And then additionally, you want to look at this upward one. Does that make sense? So a massive up and down motion that broke all of the known kind of supports and whatever. So at this point, what we're looking for is to see, is it going to hold and more quick motions before that happens. It's not like nothing else could possibly happen. Like this is potentially a bottom, and then if you jump this creek, you're probably going to run back up one more time. What this would allow you to do is at least one more time, right? What this would allow you to do is retest 570 and retest this creek that we previously just rejected off of it. There's no questioning that back here around, I don't know, 30 minutes ago. And then you could get back to that same area and get to it lower. So you could approach it at a slightly lower level, way lower if it took like all day, right? You could be like way over here at 570 or something near the end of the day, and it'd be, in sync. But generally speaking, you're going to approach it probably at a slightly lower level. And that's kind of like the moment of truth, right? Because once we get to that point, you could have a UT here. You could have a UT way up here. So it could reapproach this creek and do it in what's called a UTAD, which is an upthrust after a distribution. So that's like there's a distribution that happens. It's bearish. The range is bearish. You come back up to the top again, and this one could even go higher than the previous one, though usually they're about the same. And then you end up coming back down. And so I would say the main scenario where this is bullish, and you guys, some of you are like, well, could it just drop? Yeah, it could, but that's why I've got the marker here as well. That's another thing that could happen, is it just starts dropping and you don't even get to the creek. And then this ends up being like this ends up being used way later, right? Way down here for like some kind of a lower jump across, maybe later in the day or something for really low, and you jump across this, you'll see a big boost, and then it'll come back, maybe back up to this top area at 550 or something, or 530, and then come back down. That kind of stuff happens too. So no matter what, there's like a dance that's going to happen here, and these are kind of your main markers. And then the main scenario where this is bullish really like is just this guy. I mean, you would be looking at it coming up, doing essentially like an SOS up here, and it would have to, I think, based on the setup, break over the yellow line. It would be like that, basically. And that's kind of the only path forward. And it might happen. Have y'all seen, everybody seen Dune? Dune, you're all like, nope, not my thing. Well, if it's not your thing, then I'm not going to spoil anything anyways. If you've read the books, you already... All right. Yeah, sorry about that. It seems like my connection cut out. You're asking about shares. No, I don't exit share. I don't exit any share. Muad'Dib. Muad'Dib. All right, but there's this really funny part at the end of the movie. I don't know if you guys saw it, and if you didn't see it, you're not going to get the joke, but it's like Stilgard, he's like the main dude that like follows Paul Atreides. You know, he's like thinks he's this prophet or whatever. And as soon as the duel is won, he like turns back and he's like shaking his head and he just basically says his name. And it's so funny. It's like, I don't know what it is, but he says it in a way that just makes me laugh out loud. And I was like, why did he say it like that? He made it like into a joke. But he turns and he says like, because they call him the Lisan Agalib, which is like the Lisan Agalib, which is like the prophet. And he turns to his buddies behind him, and as soon as he wins the duel, he goes, Lisan Agalib. And everybody goes, yeah, Lisan Agalib. And it's so funny to me because it's like, it reminded me of people being like, you know, like rooting for their favorite person. And they're just like, yeah, go dogs, or something like that. Like, like a sports match or something. I don't know how to describe it, but if you have access to the movie, watch that part at the end. It's so funny to me. Anyways, I said something a minute ago. It just reminded me of that. That's all I brought it up. You guys are like, what the heck's he talking about? Leroy Jenkins. It's like, he's just like, yeah, that's us. That's our team. We won. It's just such a funny... He's actually really funny in the movie. He's the only one that has like almost, except for maybe Gurney, who's played by, what's his name? Broden. And Josh Broden. And he's the only one that seems to have any humor in the movie. It's not a very funny, you know, it's Dune. It's not meant to be like, it's accidentally funny sometimes, but it's a very serious like movie. But yeah, his character, he's so good. He's got such good timing. I don't know why that part cracks me up. So, the older brother, Brown, he had Thanos on his side. That's right. Yep. In the book, Gurney's way more important. They don't really give him a lot to do in the movies. He's a very secondary character. I mean, he kills, what's his name? Drax. The Baron's nephew. That's about all he does. Uh-oh, spoilers again. Sorry. Booksy just spoiling movies left and right. Yeah. Check FFIE. I'm not buying it. It's going to be a big fat green day. Well, you don't have to buy anything. I'm not trying to tell you that this is going to end a certain way. I think there's a possibility here this ends really bullish. I was mentioning earlier that the way in which this happens just to me indicates that there's a change of direction coming, up or down. That's all. So, Aquaman is in Dune as well. He's in the first one. He plays, you could tell I'm a fan, but he plays the warrior dude, Duncan, who's supposedly one of the better warriors and pilots, but Duncan's the opposite. He's given way more screen time, and he's not that important in the book. He's there, but he's not given much to do sometimes, and Gurney's way more important in the book. I don't know why they did that. It's great material. It's really great. If you like sci-fi, you definitely should read Dune. I mean, it's fascinating. It's not, it's not the most like action-packed kind of stuff, but it's really interesting. And if you like the movies, you'd probably like the books. they give you a lot more information, which, you know, maybe is kind of the nature of books. They always give you more, and they give you a lot more in the books, like a lot more information about what's going on. It's very much like a Game of Thrones in space before Game of Thrones was a thing. I mean, Red Wedding, anybody, right? It's kind of like the Harkonnens come and kill off an entire house overnight and nobody knows about it. And that's like Dune, right? So it's very historical as well for like science fiction. Like there's a lot of stuff in Star Wars that's not, I would say ripped from Dune, but it's very much like similar. Like it rhymes in some ways. Not all of it. You know, I don't think there was an effort to like copy anything. I just think there's similarities. So yeah, Dune is a much better film series than the new Star Wars. I mean, it's just very, very good. Denis Villeneuve, that's how you pronounce his name. If you're wondering, it's a foreign name, right? So for Americans, we're like, Denis Villeneuve. He's a very competent director, very, very good director. And then he works with Roger Deakins, who I think he did Blade Runner with him. I don't know if he did Dune, the second Dune. He did the first one, I think, because they got the best cinematography. Anyways, master of lighting. And Roger Deakins, I think he first kind of hit my radar when I believe he did The Revenant. And if you know anything about that movie is all naturally lit. Like they don't use studio lights almost at all. Like it's pretty much the entire movie is just naturally lit. And that was to give you the sense of like he's in the wilderness, you know. This is the way it feels. And it's just gorgeous. I mean, he's a master cinematographer. And of course, with Blade Runner and with Dune, it's just like the lighting. He uses so much natural lighting. He just finds ways to, and he works with the same guys a lot. I mean, they work a lot of times, the people work together, but that's why they create these amazing visual set pieces, because they're thinking about the feel of it and all that stuff. And, you know, Star Wars has its moments, you know, and I think the reason a lot of people like Empire Strikes Back so much is because of that consideration for like lighting and set. And there's just such a strong consideration for, I mean, it's such a simple concept too. You watch Empire Strikes Back and you're like, oh, it's blue and orange. Those are complementary colors. And you see blue and orange color schemes in movies all the time now. And then you'll see red and green, you know, and then you'll see the primary color scheme. One of the easiest people to see is like Wes Anderson. He does color schemes galore. He likes the pastels, but he uses classical color schemes in his movies. It makes them look the way they look. Anyways, that's one of the reasons I think people really like Empire, is because it's got the really strong consideration for like the visual and how that's helping with the story narrative. And the new Star Wars movies, they just don't have that. J.J. Abrams is not, and I'm not going to talk about his writing style, but his directing style, it's very like flashy. He likes the lights in your face. He's a big lens flare guy, but he also just kind of, it's very like manic. Like he really likes the activity on the screen, and that just doesn't really vibe with a lot of people. It just makes you feel like you're going to have a seizure or something. He's had some pretty strong visuals, and I actually thought the visuals in, I would say, even though I didn't really love the story, the visuals in the second one, The Last Jedi, are much better than the visuals in the other two. I mean, the salt flats, those are really cool with the red coming from behind the vehicles. Just really clever, simple ideas like that can really make an impact in your mind. And the infinity mirror with Rey, and when the Lightspeed ship hits the other ship, like those are stark, like really good, powerful like visuals that stick in your mind. I'm not talking about the story. I'm not going to go there, but the visuals in that film are really good. And I thought that's how I felt about the guy who did he did another movie recently. I haven't seen it yet, like Creator or Creation or something like that. The guy that did what's it called? Rogue One. That has some really awesome visuals too. Just the cinematography in it. It's like it's almost not Star Wars because of how it looks, you know? Almost. Like he strayed a little too far here and there. Like that opening planet is just such a contrast to other things, you know. I don't know, it's just this kind of like almost like Scotland, like this wet, dewy, dark area. It's just different. I don't know. I have a great appreciation for cinematography, if you can't tell. I like seeing like a good cinematographer across their work and just see how they change. And directing is important, but directing isn't exactly the same as cinematography. There's elements of it. You see like the people behind the screen. If you're not really into movies, which I don't know why you'd be in this stock if you weren't into movies, but you can see the directors behind the scenes or sometimes behind the camera. They do work very closely with their cinematographer. The cinematographer is the guy that's setting up the lights and making sure everything looks right in the lens. You know, that the camera is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And then the director is often the one helping to move the shots around, and obviously he's directing the actors and the story narrative. So they play a really big role together, but yeah, cinematographer is kind of like given the instruction, you know what I mean? Most of the time he's operating the camera and again, setting up the lights and stuff. So it's a different role. So if you think something visually looks really amazing, it could be your director made that decision, but a lot of the time, and it usually obviously starts with like art boards from like really early on when they're planning out what it's going to look like, but it's usually your cinematographer. So if you're like, whoa, that looked so beautiful, that shot, it's probably your cinematographer, not your director. Anyways, so yeah, AMC is trying to bottom here. I'm on the 6 minute. I'm not going micro nitty gritty yet. I'm guessing it's oversold on like the 1 minute because it's already coming down. It's nearly oversold on the 6. Well, we got some room to go, but it's like usually this is a good indication on the 6 minute of where you might see a bounce. That's why I'm looking at that instead of like the nitty gritty. But I bet if we went down to like 3, probably oversold. It was for a minute and it kind of flattening out here. So this gives me a little bit more of a bullish position because the way this is reacting could be a bottom. You see that push up and that kind of flattens out. It could be like you get a push from here. And that kind of gives me a sense of like a falling cat ear motion where you get like that quadruple top and then it dips and then it rips. So I'm kind of surprised it's flat as it is. Same on 1 minute, it's really flat. So yeah, oddly it never even got overbought on the 1 minute. So that definitely tells me there's a possibility we're going to see a big secondary motion. And now I'm starting to see this as just an M cross. So I think we're seeing part 2. And that's important when you're looking at, in my opinion, when you're looking at stuff, because it gives you a sense of like where you may be in a setup. So that just tells me that there should be one more. I think we're going to see that second half over here, and then we'll see what happens. We'll see where it sets up. So there should be one more push up here, and then I think we'll make a decision. So it looks like we're trying right now against that creek. It was shot on a Sony FX3. Dewey. Andor did a great, yeah, well, Andor was kind of shot just like just like Rogue One. I mean, it was based on the same time period and characters, and Andor's very pretty. And what I like about it is it's not in your face. You know what I mean? Like there's these beautiful moments, but overall it's just well made. You get the feeling it's like the set pieces are great, but it's not like they're trying to impress you, you know? But yet there's still visual interest. Like there's the scenes in Andor where the Imperial guy is like talking to his mom and she's like crazy, right? She's so mean to him. But like he's talking to his mom and he's eating like his blue milk cereal or whatever. And that shot is so well composed. It's such a simple shot, but it's like so effective because you have really good lighting and you have really good simple directing. And it just has this impact. It makes you feel uncomfortable. And that's exactly what the scene was trying to do, is that it makes you feel like structured and uncomfortable. And it's perfect. That's exactly what you want. You know, in that scene. It's just really smart. I pay attention to all kinds of stuff like that. I have like a million examples of those kinds of things. And if a movie doesn't do that for me, then I generally just don't think of it very highly in that way. It's not that the movie itself is bad, but if I don't remember the shots, if nothing's memorable, I generally am kind of like, okay, well, if it's not memorable, it's not memorable. I don't think it had the greatest cinematography, you know. It's going to be different for different people, obviously. Yeah. So I don't think this is going to happen now. I'd be really surprised if we saw a drop now that went below here and stayed below here. But I have a problem here where we haven't really looked at anything higher. Somebody said we're going sideways because GME keeps halting. Yeah, I mean, they are kind of married at the hip most days lately, so yeah, this looks like it's trying to bottom out. So you see the volume dropped off and we're getting a little reaction. Okay, so this has a little bit of a different vibe here on the 15-minute. Just like on the small time frame, we were thinking maybe it comes back up here. Like, so you get that wave out. So this is M1 and then this would be M2. So there'd be some kind of a motion here, which makes sense. And I think we're just going to leave it the way I drew it the first time. That looks like it's ready to happen. But on the 15-minute, you can see it's different. It's below. It definitely gives you the sense that if it didn't advance here, that it would be sort of like a cat ear motion with a hook. Now, we did the same thing yesterday, and I was just saying this a minute ago. We did the same thing yesterday in almost the same way. Granted, this is a little different, but this has a very similar vibe. And I don't mean saying that over and over again, but you get what I'm saying. So just like yesterday, you kind of had that motion down. You can call it an M cross, you can call it a cat ear, whatever you want to call it. The motion here is specifically like trying to drag the, and I'm not saying this is the reason that this trades this way, but you can see it visually in like the price action, is you're trying to pull down and see if sellers are going to take over. You're doing a liquidity check and it's holding, right? So this actually looks like it breaks down on that second ear right here after that wick, and then it kind of drops and it does recover. So this is where you get this big recovery. It actually comes above. When it finds support, that's kind of the same time you're seeing like a big buy-in going up into this top, and you see the volume rockets. So we're in a similar spot right now. Like you can see the motion of the second ear here. Same deal, it kind of pushed down. And so if it finds support, I would venture that we're in kind of a rinse repeat mode. We're probably going to see something pretty similar, like this push up like that. Should I see another push up like that? And then we may just go fully parabolic for a bit. So again, like it could be a really bullish play here. And I was talking about a straddle because I think that if it does push, you're probably going to see it go to near 7. And if it doesn't, I think you're going to come down pretty far. Yeah. So much like yesterday, I think this could be like a really nice, simple play back to the upside. It's not out of the question. I'm thinking about it now. I'm thinking about the way these arcs are. I think that this looks like it broke down, but that's just because the way I drew it. But a lot of times, if I draw it wrong, I noticed that later when it comes back up, you get a jump like later on. This ends up being like, it kind of comes to the outside, if that makes sense, of the arc. So if I'm a little early, I might not change this. I might just leave it, because a lot of times it'll just kind of be like a middle arc and it whips around it and then goes up. And that's often very true. Might even be wise to go ahead and do something like that here, because I think it would be a little earlier like that, sort of right along that tangent, if that makes sense. So this could give you a really strong case for potential move up like this. So that would kind of finish the parabola. So I'm going to do something real quick. I'm going to look at this as like a 50-50. So roughly, let's see here, 13, 15, that's like 1 o'clock my time. Yeah, so roughly there, makes sense. So I'm going to leave that as a possible window of opportunity, because I think there's a possibility if this holds that it just continues back up and we see it move up by near close. It'd be like a couple hours before close. Maybe during that roaring kitty thing, it gives everything a boost. So max pain is 5 now. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think we could get to 5. It was hard for me to imagine going all the way to 450. So take off the arrows pointing down. Those are to show you like selling. So like, I know that it doesn't look good, but, oh, you mean like these ones? These are just critical levels. That's all. So if we want to keep it really, let's keep it really simple here. Like if this comes up, there's only a couple different ways it goes, and you can see them here. And everything else sort of boils down to this level. Like if you break this level at some point today, like all of the red would be the same, which would be breaking, like it would all have to be the same. It would be breaking this parallel and then breaking the low. And I think, to me, I think that would be very distributive action. I think you would probably just get continuation. You would hook here. And it'd have to be, again, you'd have to see it kind of hook and then drop beneath 530 and then continue down. And I think you could get down to 5 pretty easily by the end of the day. So it'd be something like that. So you'll notice that like the main motions here, if we're just going to like summarize the motions, they're pretty much the same thing. And this is kind of the interesting thing about when we talk about fractals and patterns, is that you'll notice that these are the same, basically the exact same motions. I mean, they're almost all identical. It's just the severity of them changes. So there's still an up, right, motion, and there's still a down motion, and then there's still an up motion, and then there's still a down motion. One of them is doing an M cross to the upside. The other one is doing an M cross to the downside. Both of them are determining the future direction typically. And then you can have occasionally like an iteration, right? That's what we call like a move that's a smaller part of a bigger move. And that could be like, if, for example, this came back up and this were distributive, then that's where you could have like a UT moment, right? And then suddenly it's like, oh, well, now we're looking at a gigantic M, and then we'd have to look at another gigantic M, blah, 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 right? We're not there yet, so I'm not going to go into that. It's just wave analysis. So right now it's holding above. It's made a higher low. It definitely came down and tested it. That's what I wanted to see. And then we're going to come and test this. I think we're probably going to break here and head up. It just doesn't look like it's ready to drop yet to me, but let's check like 30 minutes and then 1 hour. Here, I'm going to get rid of this stuff so I can see better. Yeah, same deal. Like kind of hasn't really made a hook action yet here on the 30-minute, so you can see it's sort of finding a trend that we've been on. This is a bit of a widening, isn't it? That's not really great because it's widening to the upside. So that makes me feel like it's probably going to try to come back down no matter what happens. But there's room to move up, you know, one more time here maybe, and that could be that upward move. And then perhaps after that breakdown, it comes pretty low. And the reason you would look at that is there's an imbalance in terms of like creek tests, and it's right here. So when this guy came down, there's a mild kind of backwards motion, but on the whole, I'd say it hasn't really been strongly checked. So when I'm looking at this, I'm kind of thinking about where are the gaps, right? We already know we're high. It could continue to rattle high if this just kept running, you know, almost forever. I mean, technically you can just keep going up in time frames and just changing it and changing it and changing it. But in general, I just would look at something like this and say, well, it just doesn't really seem like you would eventually come back down. So if this happened and we didn't really move, so if we stayed up really high, like for some reason it came up above 570 and it sat there and this came way down, well, you've kind of reset the RSI, right? And that can give you an indication that you're probably going to move again from the level that you're at, where the RSI on a higher time frame, like 30 up to 2 hour or something like that, that's a relatively good intraday time frame. That could be a really strong indication that you're ready to advance again. So it's important to kind of keep tabs on it. Whereas if we saw this kind of push up high and it got overbought again really quick, we went up to like 578 and this thing's already at topped off, well, that could tell you that you might be dropping. You know, like, oh crap, we're overbought and we haven't even advanced the creek yet. That's not good, you know. And then you end up with a reversal and it goes down low. So those are just simple ways of understanding. And I think everybody that trades should have some basic understanding of that price, volume, RSI action. That's why I like it, because it's one of the most basic indicators, relative strength index. And yeah, there's a lot of dynamics to it that I think are really interesting. So the last time we had this kind of rising motion was back here. And it's interesting because we're kind of back to the same trend. We were just talking about this a minute ago. But we're up to the 1 hour now. So the last time we had this kind of rising motion in RSI was back over here. And you can see that when it did eventually break down, it was a big peak. Volume peaked and then it dropped through whatever this was our present uptrend, right? And we're kind of already back to the top of that. So we've made the cross here, boom, boom, double top, right? And then you can look and see like the breakdown brought you back low. So this ends up being like a big shallow S-curve kind of deal. Then we're rising again and we're already on the 1 hour, we're already kind of overbought. So this is part of the reason why I wasn't super bullish about today's open, because I think 1, 2, and 3 were all like that. They were all overbought yesterday, like before the end of the day. So this doesn't look as bad. You could see here like having another push up. It seems possible. On the 2 hour, it's not like way out of the question. You can see the widening though. It's still happening. And then I think 4 hour was fine. I don't think 4 hour was overbought yesterday. Yeah, it stayed kind of below. And I was mentioning like there's a comparison I was using for GME. GME is different though, because GME, I think up to the 4 hour was actually looking kind of overbought. This is the 1 hour. Yeah, it had pushed high. So to me, like this is sort of what I was seeing on GME as likely, and then potentially forming out a reaccumulation seemed very likely. I still think long term very bullish. I just think short term sideways, and then we'll see. With FOMC right around the corner, that could be this downward motion that we get, followed by like a buy back in. If the market ends up, we were just sort of chewing it up earlier, talking about it. If the market ends up having that sell down to 200 or even lower, that could be the place where we see that pull down on AMC and GME to get that middle range and start reaccumulating. I got to be honest, AMC's in a really different kind of spot than GME though. Like, it seems too low in some ways. Like, GME is way up here by comparison to where AMC is. So I think a lot of folks are probably thinking about that too. Like, oh, it's going to go way up because it has to catch up. Maybe. These are the lines I drew sort of second. So the first ones I did were really steep, and I still have them somewhere, but they were a lot steeper than this. So they were actually like this line here. So if you're looking at those parallel comparisons, and when I do that, you can see that this steeper parallel, it's kind of already been met. So just like GME met its parallels yesterday, technically, like, I'm using kind of two different sets here, but technically AMC did as well. Like, it popped up to this area, especially in if you look at the after hours price action, you know. So these were the ones I was using before I started using the blue guys. I know I'm making it worse. You guys are like, what are you doing? You're making it horrible. I know. But I was using these steep parallels because it just looked really steep. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, I know that GME went up to the 618, and our 618 is like 792 on AMC. So it seems like that would be a given. I don't think anything's a given in the market. So I want to make myself at least available to the idea that it's not the case that we go to like 792, even if it's probable, it's impossible. I still want to think about, well, what happens if it doesn't get there? You know, and I think this area right here at 616 does make sense to me. If we're not going to go higher, like that could work. It intersects both the parallels right here around 616. So this little pocket is definitely not out of the question in my mind. I'm like, yeah, it would kind of fit the motif for both. And then I'd have to look at what would happen, you know, after that, and so on and so forth. I'll tell you this much: if we don't advance beyond 616, and we start seeing that breakdown happen on GME sideways, like there's no continuation upward, instead we start moving sideways, maybe slightly sideways and down, especially going into FOMC, if this kind of happens here. I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption, because I don't have another choice in this case, that what's most probable on AMC is that we don't advance again, just like with GME, and that instead of these blue lines that you can see, we're going to use these red lines a little bit more. And I think they're kind of competing. I do. But I could see this again. I know I've kind of already been down this road before, and you guys are like, well, you were wrong. It didn't come down yesterday or whatever. You're right. Again, like, it's possibility and probability, not predetermined, you know, outcomes. So as fun as it is to kind of sketch out a little predetermined outcome, or to use some kind of a fractal and say, this is the way it's going to be, that's not the way the market works. So you can't rely on that for buy and sell signals. Like, I don't rely on that for buy and sell signals. I look at the setup as it is, and then I decide where I'm going to buy or sell, and that's it. Period. And I'm talking about options trading. So when I look at this and I see this possibility, I'm like, sure, I could see it coming back down to, you know, this level. This would be like a 50% retrace on a push to 616, would be somewhere around the 450s. That's where we've been this whole time. And it, to some degree, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you're like, well, we already pushed off of that 450 area back here. Why do it all over again? I don't know. You know, I don't know why we would need to set up lower. I don't know if that's a highly desired area, around 520, or if they're just kind of saving the move. And then I don't really know what that does ultimately to the bigger moves, you know. It could change the nature of the larger moves, and maybe that's the plan here, is to kind of keep it low. And I'm not even talking about the potential to go down again, though that's still there. That's a different story of like massive downside here and then hooking and then dropping again. That's a possibility, you know. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. That's interesting though. I don't use that very often. Trend-based fib time. I should learn how to use that one. Great, more lines, Booksy. Don't worry, I'm not keeping it on the chart forever. Yeah, so as an estimation, I could see this working because it takes you, 1618 takes you up to $22, which is where the creek is. So I don't really know. I don't know why you would, it's, well, actually the 1618 here is different. Hold on. It takes you up to 40. That would be the gap fills basically. But the 1272 is at 24. Yeah, I don't really know. It's all like liquidity, you know, like maybe it's something to do with shorts trying to get out of positions low, instead of like bringing it back up here. Maybe it's just like where we haven't traded as much, you know, right above this range previously. That was like a liquidity gap there. We talked about that right between 675 and 5. So 675 to 5 might just be an area that's desired because of liquidity purposes, you know, and that range kind of makes sense because if you look at this, and then we did push up to like, let's say the 0.5 at 698, it could give you like a simple area to reaccumulate and then push out. I really don't know why we would go chop low like it down again, other than just to kind of shake out some folks and get another low buy-in. And I'm not talking about like big picture, like what happens if you go down to like 190 or $2, or that's still on the table possibly. It hasn't happened yet though. There's no breakdown here just yet. We're not that far from it, I'll tell you that. And I don't like to be the, I don't like being the negative Nancy person, but we talked about yesterday there are fractal comparisons that don't end in upside. I mean, a lot of folks are just using upside comparisons when they look at stuff, but like this is an example. This is almost 1-to-1. There's some parts that are pretty different, and I think it's worth considering, but this setup right here is really, really similar in a lot of ways. And the big picture that I would just urge you to kind of caution you about is this top, right, is like, the nature of the cat ear is that it might look like it's advancing, but ultimately it's like a distributive action. I don't think the volume profile is the same here. I don't think it's 1-to-1 per se, but the setup here going into this move and then out of this move, there's some pretty stark similarities. I mean, there's a lot of things here that are similar. There are some differences as well. Like this just has a flagging motion, and when it breaks the flag, it just fails to come back up. This has a flagging motion. It breaks the flag, and then it does come back up and regains the flag. It is making higher supports, which is a big deal. This never really made higher supports above the tops at 45 right here. You can see like that top level never really provides any support. Our top levels have provided some support. That's like looking at 523 down to 5. So those are positive signs, you know, that it's not 1-to-1. But if you're just looking at a fractal comparison, like, it's pretty straightforward, you know. You basically wouldn't want to break down this trend here. So this guy, this lower guy, would be your death level. So yeah, so I'm thinking like at this point, we could go down to 5 again and probably be okay. And then even into that FOMC meeting, it might even be just a chop, around 5. And I think it would be fine. And if it's bullish, it should stay there. And if we got a dip after FOMC and we're sitting at 5, I think it could be very bad for AMC, potentially. I don't really want to see that happen. But in the grand scheme of things, I would have to say we'd probably end up seeing like below $4, and then potentially we could have a reversal, but that's not here yet. But if that happened, I would be like, yeah, it's probably not great. You know what I mean? Holding here would be way better, and then maybe if we go sideways until then, and then whatever, I don't know. We're not there yet. That's all I was going to say. Next week's going to be really interesting. I'll be really interested to see how this sets up going into this meeting, because I think it's going to be a very easy to read thing. Well, no, I think they're going to make it hard to read, but I think we're going to see whether or not it's actually tested these really critical levels, which is good. And we don't have that yet. So for now, like I'm thinking it looks fairly benign. Like I could see it making one more big advance up, potentially to that 616 area. And I've got that as kind of like an early, I kind of messed up this chart. Anyways, I could see us kind of just doing a quick advance to like 616, and that's it today. I could also see us having a, or 620 maybe. I could also see us having a run up really far to where we were pre-market. But with max pain at 5, doesn't seem as likely to me. And just based on the way it happened, I have been leaning a little more bearish. So just letting you know. You just got to see it happen, I think right now, I was talking earlier about this. I think right now, we're going to get a rebound. One more. We're jumping over this little creek. I don't see us dropping it, but if it dropped from here, that would be pretty weak on the part of buyers. We just worked our way across. There's no reason why with that higher low and jumping over the creek, you shouldn't see it advance. That doesn't make sense. All right, it looks like a bit of a shallow S-curve with a curtain drop. So what we're going to look for is we're going to look at like a new cross down here. I'm going to get rid of some of this older stuff. This has already happened, so I'm not really concerned about that right now. So what bulls are trying to do is elevate it and keep it above this more major, we'll call it a creek. It's really a parallel line. I don't know if it'd be considered a creek, but it has acted as like resistance and support at this point. So at this point, it's safe enough. I think you could say, yeah, it's kind of a creek. So we're kind of eating up right above it. So if you find support here, excuse me, and you get a break above, you should see some strength in that move. Yes, that's exactly what we talked about a minute ago, relative decibel. But it's important to note that I don't look at an upward fractal and say it has to happen. I don't look at a downward fractal and say it has to happen either. So when I look at this picture, I just want to read it as it is. And it's hard to do that until it's kind of worked itself out. which sounds like an excuse to a lot of people. I hear myself saying it and I'm like, well, doesn't that just mean you don't know till you know? And that's kind of but that is kind of the truth, right? And like when I'm trading, I shouldn't be assuming anything. I should look at the big picture, and I've already done it. And I've told you guys what I think. Like basically up to 4 hours here, we're on a bit of a weakness. So we need to see RSI chill out. We need to see like some kind of a reaccumulation happen. Like we had a big push up. It's great that we had a big push up. We may be able to keep it above 525. Right? Maybe. So like that would be positive. Like I wouldn't see that as a negative, you know, just because the patterns look kind of similar. They're not the same. I just told you guys why, because we did find support high on the previous tops. So unlike what happened back in that pre-reverse split move, that never found support above those tops that were made. The early auto reactions, it did not. So at least for now, if those supports hold, again, around 5 here, and I think down to 5 makes sense because that's where we found a bottom yesterday. You see that big buy-in happens, and then we're up above. My biggest concern is, of course, that it redistributes here, that this is a gigantic cat ear. And yeah, I think if we were to drop below 5, you really don't have very much to look forward to, right? Unless you get a quick recovery on this range, this top range, which is the way I think it always should be treated. And you have to remember that I misread the pre-split move too, and I think Stockfather did as well, because it looked like a giant SOS with a backup, and it was, but the backup itself, at the end of the backup, that part was true, at first, because you're like, well, what else is it? Could be a UT, but you don't know until you don't see it advance. And that's what happened, because at the end of that backing up motion, it stayed above the creek. It was fine until all of a sudden it wasn't, and you saw, oh, it's distributing. It's not holding any support above that auto reaction. And it was very fast, very, very fast. It happened in a matter of like a few hours. I mean, the final move, I think it was less than a day, if I remember right. And then all of a sudden it was over. And it had dropped, like 20, 30% in after hours. I mean, so there really wasn't much to see. I think you could have guessed and been pretty accurate that, hey, if this drops, it's going to go really far, which we already kind of knew because the curtain rod effect. That's not really what's happening here right now. So I'm a little more optimistic until I'm not, right? There's not really much else to go off of at this moment. Like I said earlier, I think there's some pretty critical markers here. This is a big one for me right now. This big fat pink line, because this is one that to me represents sort of the last major trend that we have. And I drew it even here kind of high, but that's where I think it roughly is. And I think that's one that's really important. And there's a couple other things like the parallels and stuff that I would be watching, but it looks like we're rejecting off that again. I think we dropped the creek again. We'll see. I'll zoom in a minute. It looks like we went right back through it. So we're diving for liquidity right now back to that floor that we had at 530. We're not finding enough buy-in to kind of push just yet. And if and when it does, it's probably going to go pretty hard, I think, back towards this guy. The longer it takes, the lower it's going to be. So what I'm saying is like that range that happened right before that Judge Zern thing, and then that split, reverse split thing, that move could have been interpreted as an SOS with a backup because the creek was so low. And we're doing the same thing right now where we had this massive push up, and then the creek is so low that you have to come way down, right? And on a major big picture kind of scale, the good news is, and I've been talking about this a lot, the good news is that returning to the creek in this case is not that far. Like, it's far, but it's not that far, you know? And that's different from where we were on the macro. You know, when we were doing this kind of garbage on the big picture back here, you got to remember, like, there are a lot of creek levels on this big picture, but like, for the most part, if you look back at this wave outward, the most important markers are super low. You know, if we were looking back here, I'm going to flip away for just a second. I think it finally rebounded. But if you look back here, it's like, well, shoot. I mean, there's creeks that are like way down there, you know, which is kind of where we ended up going. I mean, that's just the truth of it. It's like there's so many checks that we could have made, but they were just really, really low. And this is why when we came down, as soon as we hit that bottom, it knew it was going to be low. We had low targets. But as soon as we hit that bottom, it was like, if we don't get a V recovery, we're going to be stuck here because you're below the floor. Like, it's just a hook. Everything about it looked kind of bad if you got stuck. So as soon as we did not make a V-shaped recovery, I was like, well, that's that. I don't know what else to tell you, you know? And then the rest is history, right? We spent another several months down here. Very quiet days, quiet streams, just kind of watching and seeing if there was a chance for recovery and where would that be, what would that look like. But I mean, everything was really low, you know? So this is a different setup, right? So like this big picture setup, it's like crud, man. There's really nowhere to go except way down. And you could argue that, like, well, maybe it's still going to go way down. Maybe it's going to go to $1, Booksy, and you're right. And went to 14 and then $1. I mean, what kind of a ridiculous prediction would that have been, right? No one would give me credit for it, by the way. Everybody would say, you're a lunatic. You didn't know that was going to happen. No, I didn't really. I mean, I kind of thought this was going to build out into some kind of an upthrust, but to come all the way back down after that would be crazy, you know. I knew that when I did that, but I still don't think I'd fully understand it if that happened. But, you know, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, yeah, it's far. It would be nasty. But I don't really see it as that way right now, because for us to get to a creek at this point is very different than where it was back there. Because we have new trends. We have a new setup. I mean, this is the early creek here. This is probably the one we would want to see a retest on. This is not that low. And if we were to go back right now and just drop straight down, we could get there. I've been saying this. We could basically get there at or just slightly above the previous bottom. That's not the same as when we were over here. There was just like nothing. There was nothing here. We've been going sideways for months away from any kind of a trend. You know, you can see the triangle, basically. It's like a right angle, right? And it's like, well, we had left that trend behind and then went sideways forever. There was nothing really there. There was other levels that were built out. There were other minor creeks, but like the biggest one was from way back here. I just deleted it, but that's different, right? So like at this point, we really haven't left our creek that far behind, you know? So even dropping here might seem really bad, sure. And I know that one of the theses that the Patano guy, and I'm just saying that because I don't know how to pronounce it, but he's been talking about 190, but that's really just the intersection of this creek and earnings. It's a simple enough target. But if you get there before earnings, then maybe that doesn't happen. Or if it does happen, maybe it's like a bouncing motion and it takes a while. And by that point, we would know anyways, you know. So, yeah. Look, I'm not particularly bullish today for a lot of reasons, but it's not because the big picture I'm bearish. It's not really the reason I'm feeling a little bit bearish today. It's not because of that. I didn't know that they were going to do a dilution, an early earnings kind of announcement. Maybe they didn't want to seem complicit with the Roaring Kitty stuff, so they didn't want to let it going. But there's always somebody that knows something, right? And there's always a technical reason. And I think the technical reason is fairly straightforward. There's a 786 retrace. There's these downward parallels. Everything has been met to nearly a T, even though this is supposedly, quote unquote, random manipulation from some individual. I think it's complete nonsense. It doesn't make any sense to me to say that, but whatever. So I still think there's a decent chance here that this is just going to go into a reaccumulation and then push up again. We have to wait it out. I don't know if you guys remember this, and you're probably not going to, again, maybe it's something where it's like I should have just left it as it was. Do you remember when we first came up here and I said maybe this forms out? And I think I had it like higher because I think I was thinking this was only going to come back down to like, I don't remember what I said at the time. I thought maybe the 0.5, like maybe 25 or something. Yeah. I don't know if you remember that, but I was like thinking like, well, maybe it comes down to like 25. And I said, well, we might actually have all the information we need to build out. And I tried to do it and I couldn't do it. So I just stopped and I was like, this is a waste of time. Because I was thinking like maybe it does this thing where it comes down and you see that kind of bottom and then you get that push up. I should have just left it on the chart. It'd be awesome if I could go find that again so people don't think I'm just making crap up. But I was basically saying you could have something like this and that could actually get you down potentially. I think at the time we were thinking it would be steep and not as long-winded. As I remember thinking it would be a little faster, but that you could potentially get down here to, it was like 13, I don't know. I did a diagram to help get you back to the creek. But that concept of like the cat ear distribution here is not novel. It's not unusual for me. I do it all every day, all the time. But it's because of that push up, and then you got the second push up, which usually has like a 1, 2, 3 motion. I never really understood why that was. But anyways, on the micro, on the quote master fractal thing I use, you really can't see what it is. You can see 3 clear motions, but it does happen quite a bit where you get like almost 3 upward motions. I do not know why exactly that is, but it happens all the time. You can see it in like previous examples. Like there's almost always like 3 big motions, like 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's an Elliott wave thing. 1, 2, 3. Like I don't know. Don't know. But anyways, a lot of times in that first ear, they're more visible. And then the second cat ear, is a repeat of everything else that's come before. And that's always how the second cat ear builds out. It's just like an iterative thing. Again, if you don't know what iterations are, it's basically just a shrinking. So you get essentially like a shrinking version of the first. And then it happens again and again and again until it's done. And it can end up being distributive or cumulative. And I don't talk about the shrinking as often because it's a little confusing, I think. But it's the same motif that you see here, right? There's that bottom we talk about. And then you get the first cat ear, second cat ear, yada, yada, yada. So I was thinking that might happen on GME as a way of reaccumulating as opposed to being distributive, which is what happened here in November. But I was using this as the example. They're both the same. They both do the same thing. They do. The difference is this final little guy. I mean, it's very minor, but it's there. It's at the very end, as most things are. So this motif of breaking down, it's essentially like 1-to-1. If you want to use like fractal terminology, fine. It's essentially like a 1-to-1 move. But then the difference is like the last jump. right? So here there's an up thrust and then another 2 up thrusts. But back in January, this second one, when it finds support here, it actually goes all the way up and does the breakout, and then it continues. Same motion, different result, different position, right? But similar motion. So, anywho. So when I was looking at that, and then of course I was saying shrinking because it is, when you look at it and then you look at how the right ear forms, this is why I think it looks like it looks. It's a shrinking version of the same exact thing, and then it actually does it again at the top, and you end up with a really flat second ear as a result, because it's compressing the same action over and over and over again. And that's the nature of any kind of a wedge or a widening or whatever. It's always kind of repeating the same motions until that range is kind of exhausted. You'll see volume dry out. That's when you know you're about to get a big move, especially on a macro move like that. So, anywho, I was thinking about that on GME early on. I remember I changed for some reason. I don't really know why, but I'm kind of back to that same model again, where I'm thinking that we're probably going to see something like that, and that's a good thing. That could be very, very bullish. Could it be bearish? Yes. It just depends on the end, but I think it could be really bullish. And considering that this is like the first jump, much like it was in January, like this is the first move out of that big wedge, I'm still kind of leaning more bullish longer term. Structure-wise, this is, if you were doing like a 1-to-1 proportionally, this wouldn't take off until mid-July. So it would be another month, because structurally speaking, you would have downside and chop to this 28, around this 28 level, maybe down to 23, right above that gap, kind of pull back through here, and you wouldn't really break out until maybe early July, about a month from now, and then you would see the final SOS build out there. The weird thing about this, though, and I've been kind of looking at it, is that I haven't really been able to figure this part out yet, is that there's a couple trends here that kind of are like cross trends that sort of mark off where the top is on AMC before it happened. And I can't really find those here. I was messing with this last night. I don't see it. This would have to be part of it, but I don't really see it. This makes sense to me, this marker as this marker. It's the same level. So it shouldn't ultimately come way back down here. If it's strong, we should kind of chop for a bit going into, again, 28 and then push out. But I don't really have any other markers, and there's not really one to go off of here either. That is interesting, though. If you go back and you do a fan on the January move, this is kind of cool. It's not really effective right now on GME, so you'd be like, why would I bother doing this? Well, if you find the middle, which is that trend, that kind of first trend there, it actually looks a pretty close, perfect, almost perfect from like bottom. If you go to like the 786, it's almost a perfect walk across. It's really close. And I don't know, I did it yesterday and I almost got it like exact, but I was like, that's interesting. Like it spans the full width of that fan. But I couldn't find the same thing here on GME. I was looking at the bottom. It's possible the bottom's on April 15th and not the 22nd, but you can see like there's a little bit of confusion there. The move starts on the 15th, but there's no real trajectories that are great, so I don't know. And if you were to build this out, you could say, well, that's your line and it's way over here and so on and so forth. It looks like you could come really low. Maybe that's what's going to happen, It just because it's similar doesn't mean it's exactly the same. Maybe it's going to have some differences in that way, and you're going to see it come lower than. And that's what I was thinking. Maybe it comes back down to this bottom, and that's why the trajectories are kind of lower. I think ideally, though, you stay above this one. I'll make it orange. because that would be, in my opinion, like a more comparable example of like strength, I suppose, is the way I would put it. So somehow staying above, again, 2391 at this point would be really strong. So if this elevation is successful and we're starting to reaccumulate, we should see it kind of bottom out again around 28. It's nothing really different. I think at lowest you could probably come back down to 2391, but that's it. I don't think you go back for the gap at like 18 or 19. So anyways, and you know, you're going to ask me like, well, do you think it's possible that it just rockets still? And I'm like, well, maybe, you know, I mean, in the big picture, this is a hard read. There's a number of possibilities here. The volume on that second buy-in is bigger than the first in some ways, and so it's weird. That's not quite the case back here on AMC. There is a secondary big buy-in in two parts here. It is quite a bit, but this almost happens like all at once. And it's different, you know? I personally think this makes a lot more sense to just do the reaccumulation and then advance. But who knows, you know? And then price target wise, there's a whole lot of ways we could go about that. People did fib extensions back here, and I think that's fine. You know, if you look, this is roughly where the 50% is, where it sets up. It's kind of near that second wick. We could do some estimations and see if our original prices were pretty close. We had a few different marks up here. Some were way higher than others. You'd probably say it's near that 618, so maybe to like 157. Now, as we were talking about with the nature of the all-time high, was if it didn't get there early enough, it's going to probably come higher. So 157 is above, you know, the 120. And then we had some really big extensions that went way up here if it found itself going any higher than that, maybe that 140, 150 area. So I don't think a price target of like 140 is unreasonable. It's hard to say though, you know, we're not there yet. So for me, I think GME is a great play because I think we could see it easily come back up to like 140. And I don't really think, even though looking at this, it might seem like that's really far off. That almost doesn't, I mean, it kind of makes sense. There's a intersection here at 142. There's an intersection at 142. Of another really important trend from like way back here. Yeah, this guy. And that's an anchored trend. That's not insignificant. I think that's the halfway. So it could be really soon. I mean, it could be like a really fast move going into July. Maybe I should try to do something similar with AMC. Might be a good time to do it since we're just kind of coasting into this roaring kitty thing. So a 1 month reaccumulation back down to 28, and then pretty much from there you just kind of rock it up to 142. Actually, it might be kind of nice. It would just be like basically like a double top and then sort of like a wedge maybe, and then just push out. Here. I'd say that checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people, so checks a lot of boxes for me in terms of like a move, so probably get some nasty little sell down. Anyway, something like that. I think it would make some sense. We'll see. Yeah, so like this is a great opportunity then if we do see 26 again and it slowly burns down into this hole to play that potential breakout or potential breakdown. Yeah. And there's a lot of intersection in this area as well, so maybe. Anyways, I don't know. What's this date? July 18th? I never did that thing with AMC, by the way. I was talking about the thing with the MPW just to look at the setup. This was all me just like spitballing back in the day. None of that happened. We broke down here instead. We almost did almost like a reversal action of what you see there. That was a rough time. There's too much garbage on this chart. But there you have it. See, I'm wrong sometimes. You know, they're like, yeah, no duh, Booksy. What is that? The 18th is close to the earnings for AMC. AMC's at 548. This 4-hour candle doesn't look too bad just yet. It kind of looks like an inverted. So that would be like a gravestone if it's at the top. But nothing else really to say about it right yet. I think that you could have it come again around 5 and just sort of sit there today, and that's probably normal expectations. We're under 550 right now. Let's look really close because I want to see if see what happened with those markers. Yeah, so it's holding. It's holding up. You may end up getting that bigger push today if it can keep holding. A crazy chart. Yeah, so there's the... This ended up looking pretty ugly because it came back below and then it crossed lower. But there's the check on that one. And it looks like it's going to push out. So what that is to me is just like a wave. So this is the up wave, down wave, then you're getting a reaction. So it should come back to this marker. And then probably going to top off a bit. So at this point, if I want this to be bullish, what I'd like to see it doesn't have to come like significantly high here, but I think we're going to look at this level at 558. Yeah, 558. So if I want this to be bullish, what I want it to do is I want to see it push over 558, and then if and when it comes back down, it doesn't have to come down very far, but I'm gonna say probably right where we're at, like 548 seems a likely candidate. I've already got it marked off on the chart, so I'm not gonna mark it again. But I'm willing to venture that would be a really bullish move. So if you see it come up and it pushes above here, yeah, I mean, like technically it could just run up and jump the creek and just start going. Sure, that's always a given. I hope you guys know that. Like if it just jumped it, it just jumps it. But if it didn't do that, what would look like a really good bottom to me would be coming up above 560, and then, or even just a penny above here. and then coming back and finding support at 548, I think you'd be likely to get a pretty significant move. And by the looks of it, I'm guessing that this is going to line up with that roaring kitty talk at noon. Yeah, so it might be that you get a push there up above 570 again, and this is where we finally go back up and test the top. Now, conversely, if you were to push up here and then you failed to make a lower low, I don't even know how that would look. So either you don't advance at all, which doesn't seem likely here. I don't know. I don't see why that would happen, but I guess it could. Based on this setup, I guess what I'm saying. It looks like a bottom to me right now. I wonder if we're going to get like a squeeze, quick little squeeze motion up to like 616 and then kind of crap out the rest of the day. It might make sense to do that here, something like that, and then come down. Yeah. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking if we can get above 560 right now, and then we find support above 548, it's probably a really... I should stay on for it? I don't know. Yeah, the turnaround point for GME is probably going to be really similar, like in terms of timing. So let's see here. I mean, it could just push above and go. That's always a given. I hope you guys know that. Like I was saying that a minute ago, it's not, wouldn't be that unusual. Just kind of waiting. But I think what we'll see is we'll see it push up and then come back down to test the creek. And when that happens, it's probably going to be around that roaring kitty thing at 11. I suppose if it pushed really high, maybe we just back up to this guy around 11. So that's the push. So that it's made a higher high here, which is a good thing. Now I want to see if it can find support. And I think if it finds support, it's going to be a pretty decent play here. So I'm going to be playing it bullish if we can find support. I don't really expect it to find support above this, but I guess if it did, it would probably just go. That's a harder one to kind of judge because so I'm using like these trends, and clearly like that's bullish. You know, jumping above and getting back above this bull trend would be like a resuming of it. So you know, we're looking at the waves, like holding here would be really bullish. You know, you just kind of go right straight up. But typically, like I don't put a lot into that because, again, normally like if it peaks above here, you get a sell down, and then we go back to this creek. That's like your SOS with a backup, basically. And then at the bottom, I don't know, maybe because it's built out lower already, you don't need to do that. Because if this hadn't come down low, my expectation would be that you need to build this out a little more. I may not do that. I don't really want to see it come up to 570 just yet. I'd rather go down and find support first and then break 570 later. Y'all are like, why? It would just be better for us to not have another hook at 570. So I don't know. I don't like that. There's another potential motion here that I'm not really charting, but it's like right here where you use the last support and the last drop. So if we're looking at a, again, I'm using creeks in relationship to waves and sine waves. So if I'm doing that, this is a potential spot I would use as well, is like the last low here, and then the place where we actually left, that could be another place of potential instead of just using these trends. I bet the charts are going to go nuts, but I don't really want to stream while he's streaming. I feel like most people aren't going to like sit here for it. Well, I guess we'll see. Man, I really want to see it back up. I don't want to see it just race all the way up. But maybe it's just going to go. It's not really stopping, is it? Nope. All right. Well, there it goes. So it went up right up to 570. Let's see if it jumps past it. I really wanted it to find support. Even like here, I don't know why we wouldn't go back. So now we're back at this guy. Whatever that is. Y'all are like, what? I think we're just running. Stocks only go straight up. No backups. Think of it like a layup. You like toss the ball up. You want to see, typically you don't want to see just kind of a parabolic straight up move that usually comes crashing down in your face. This already happened earlier today where you had this kind of straight up move and then it just came crashing down. So don't really want to see that again because it's setting up in a place that, I don't know, I just don't like that. Just come back down and get support. It's not that complicated. You got 20 minutes here. Let's just see it happen. You know? So I'm going to play some $6 calls for next week. I'm not going to, because that's up here, and I'm not going to play farther than that for now. I find I'm more successful with options if I'm in leaps, long term, or really, really short term. Like in and out in the same day kind of thing. I don't typically like holding them overnight. If I have to, or if I feel strongly about it, I might hold some of them. But I've learned my lesson enough with AMC options at this point that I personally don't buy into this midterm kind of stuff. I think it's typically not the best for me. I just don't do as well. So what I'm going to do is start averaging into, I'm worried they're going to like rug pull it at 11. So we've essentially moved from the bottom to the top again. You can see the symmetry here in the motion and how there's a necessity at this point. Again, we're back at 570 to kind of make a decision. Kind of worried that this went too high and it's going to sell off again through 570. I'm kind of irritated. It's not over until it's over, right? That's the way I always try to put it. You have to have a mindfulness about you, and then just let it be what it is. And just be ready for your moves to happen or not happen. So GME, we were asked about that. I'm going to go in a little closer on GME. I haven't even looked at this close up. A little different. I mean, it's a little higher set, but I also think it's got a lot of similarities. So you got to sell down from the earnings report. Nothing really surprising there. It broke below the support at 33.70, and then the local creek was met. That was pretty easy to see. There's no doubt that that was touched. So yeah, there's not really much to say just yet. I think we're just kind of waiting in the wings here to see what happens, see if this really has any impact. All right, well, look, if y'all think that you would stick around and watch the price action, I think that's fine. We can do that. I'm just not sure if it's the right call right here to do that. I feel like there's going to be a lot of people that don't really want to do that right now. So I was going to just watch the Roaring Kitty thing and see what happens. I think we're going to come back to 5. I think we might get a big pop potentially here and then drop again. And I'm not even so sure that we're going to make it to 6. I know I keep flip-flopping, but I think at this point, you don't really have to go that high to sort of push the creek. So what I've noticed on AMC is that a distributive action may not even go above the top. It might just go slightly above the creek. So really, like as soon as we got to like 593, maybe even over this 589, I think you could have it fail. So, crazy day, huh? Nah, you don't want to do that. My internet's terrible, so. I have no doubt, but a lot of those folks are not, like sympathy moves are one thing, but a lot of those folks are not really looking for a AMC pump. You know, they're really focused on GME. The ones that are there just hyping it up, it's a little different. So, yeah, I was just looking at GME. I think if we find support above 558 at this point, you've got a really positive case from a technical standpoint of continuation. It's basically formulating like a hook-like action on the short term, but if it can find support here at above 558, I think the AMC is going to be able to breach this and have another push up to the 6s. I think it's possible that we get a pump that happens because of DFV Roaring Kitty stuff. Okay. I don't think it's out of the question. But in terms of a rug pull after that, I think it's very likely. So I'm just being straightforward. That's my opinion about it. You don't have to agree. You might think it's going to take off and just go, 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 go. Right now, the localized action can't support a push above. I'm just telling you from a technical standpoint, it can't come above like that 592 area, 589 area, and then slide back down through the major sort of creek regions, which means you can't go back. Let me say it as simply as I possibly can, okay? If you push above the buying climax at this point, all right, even if it goes all the way up to 615, you then cannot have it come all the way back down through 570. In my opinion, that's kind of the make or break. So if it pushed up here and then came back down to like 570 and broke through that, I'd be pretty bearish. And we've already talked about the possibilities locally of it being bearish because of the M cross here. It makes it so questionable because you're like, well, it could be a bottoming action above this potential parallel. I mean, I think that's a possibility. I see a quadruple flush, right? My issue is the way that it happened, which is it dropped low, hit that 526, then it came high. That would be like your SOS. So at this point, it's like this really deep backup motion, and then you have to kind of advance. And if you try to advance and you fail, sellers are going to dump the stock like crazy at this point. I'm just saying, they're probably going to come all the way back down to 5. It may not be today, but it would be going into next Wednesday. Easily come back down to 5. That's not like a huge dump. And that we would have to look then at like possible major breakdown levels. Okay, I'm not there yet. GME is not in that exactly the same situation. It's similar, but GME actually had a big move during regular trading hours up to its 786. It already had that move, and it broke down. I don't believe any news is really ultimately determining what TA is going to do. So I already kind of thought that it was going to come back down. I had already gotten out of option positions yesterday. I didn't feel comfortable with the way the RSI and all that stuff looked. It just looked bad. And all I heard were people were pumping it, and that to me is usually not a great sign. So that's the reason I exited. At this point, let me look at GME real quick, because we got 10 minutes. I guess enough time for me to kind of mess with this. Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to just do something that I would normally do, which is just looking at this and then see if that applies to a trend above. Okay, so probably going to be around the similar time frame here. So maybe it meets $39 or something like that. It did the same kind of action here as AMC. So you see how it bottomed out. AMC is a little different because this first move of the day actually came lower on AMC. But on GME, I was mentioning like if this had come down, it's weird how like, I don't know. I feel like AMC's chart's so much dumber than GME's chart. Like GME was doing what I was saying earlier. I wish AMC had done, which is not made the low first, but come down later. And if that were the low, I would be expecting this push and then a rebound to hold high. That would give me a lot more confidence. So we're basically like, you're coming up above this top right here, coming low and then pushing above that top and either holding or just at least holding like a higher support. I think personally you could hold 550 and be fine. I don't think you needed to hold up here at 558. So if it did come down, as long as it holds at 550, GME is a similar situation. That's why I'm bringing that up, because on the 6-minute chart, I'm going to go full screen on GME for a minute. To me, it looks like, yeah, same deal. So you have this push down to low, and then it came back up. It jumped over this EMA, which is fine. But really, it just needs to hold 36, and I think it'd be fine. Looking back at these previous levels, maybe even as low as 35.50. Yeah, 36. So it's like a creek jump, right? It's not complicated. You advanced, and then you just have to hold. So as long as this holds up, it's probably going to advance, and then you're going to get a big move to the upside. And then I would be waiting to see if it could breach this outer trend. If that happens, I think this is where we talk about maybe an imbalance here. I think you're going to come back up. Now, this is where things get kind of dicey, because just like AMC, notice that this has an upthrust. It goes above the top. So be that what it is, you know, at this point, there's a danger here in a sort of a pump and dump, if you will. It's not a guarantee. Not trying to freak anybody out. I'm just telling you that if you come back over that top again, you can't start sliding back down through creeks. That's the same exact way on AMC right now. So we can't come back above like 48 and then expect it to be bullish unless it holds a support above, you know. And more than likely, at this point, because of the way this is moving, it wouldn't necessarily, if it did do this, it wouldn't even necessarily be obvious till maybe the end of the day. I could see this pumping up and then sort of chopping again. And who knows, you know, how long that takes. But if this kind of motion happened and it came down again, I'd be pretty concerned, at least short term. So I would say once it gets above 48, you don't want it to come back below 44. That would be more distributive. And I'm going to venture a guess that this is going to be a fairly simple trend by the time we get there if we make this move. I'm making an assumption that it's going to pump, okay? That this would be like what I would be worried about with a cat ear, right? Like you don't want it to go below here. This is really critical. So moment of truth stuff may not happen until later. Now, if we don't get an advancement here, which would be a bit unusual given the circumstance of this setup, I would be a bit confused if it didn't advance. But I guess if it didn't advance beyond this marker at like 40, I don't even know what I would do with that. I guess you just kind of look at the channel down. I don't know what else you would do. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that it would do that, but maybe back down to like 26 or 28. I don't know. There's a lot of space here. I mean, technically, even if it dropped now, I mean, you could come back down to like 35 and you'd be okay. There's nothing really busted yet on this bottom area, so the only way I could see it sort of stopping now would be some kind of a, with 5 more minutes to go until he goes live, would be some kind of like a sign of weakness followed by like an upthrust, I guess, to like 39. And then some kind of like a distributive action here. That's the only thing I could think that might take it down at this particular moment, would be a localized micro distribution. I mean, it could be as simple as a little wick above 38. I guess, because that's a little localized top. I'm not really looking forward to looking at tiny like micro stuff though. It feels like this range is already kind of working its way out, this little tiny range right here. So I don't know. At that point you gotta be like way in here. I don't like that kind of stuff. So what's this top? High of 38.45. So 38.45 is currently the place to sort of advance. So that dip was an attempt to kind of break down out of the the trend. We'll see if it holds. This looks like it'd probably be like a cat ear kind of thing. So you're gonna have a little bit of a flatter area, and then if it holds, it should just go right up. And if it doesn't, then you're gonna have to play the little game here of where does it land? I don't dislike trading, but sometimes it's a bit stressful. In terms of like trying to keep up with this micro stuff, it's not easy. You're doing a lot of charting really fast. I mean, at least it's stimulating, I guess. Could be worse. Could be like stapling papers, you know. sometimes. What do I think about it running on the same algorithm? Yeah, well, anytime, and I'm going to look at your other comment here in a second. Anytime people say stuff about algorithms, I just think about how operators are really, really big companies that run programs and to trade, right? When people say algorithm, they're talking about a specific method of back and forth trading between like the bid and the ask and different liquidity levels on multiple time frames. So looking at macro to micro and all that stuff. And I think about that, and I think about how all of that's about liquidity. It's all about how are you trying to get shares? How are you trying to get to sell values, to buy values? It's all about finding where the buyers and the sellers are in the market, because they're not squeezing money from themselves. They're squeezing money from other people, and they're squeezing money from retail traders mostly, but also other institutions. So like, the thing about algorithms is it's a composite operator. It's never like one person. Like we might say that there's an alpha, like the emu, who is basically like your BlackRock. But there's multiple people trading it. So the concept of there being like a singular force that's driving every single thing, it's more of an amalgamation. I think you have different players in different stocks. So you're going to see that there's similarities in the way things are traded. But I don't think we needed algorithms to see that. Like the idea of Wyckoff, that is still at play, and it's bizarre as it is. You still see those cat ears from, diagrams that were made 100 years ago. So the concept of it being like similar or samey, that to me is like a no-brainer, Yeah. That to me is a no-brainer. Like that you would have a lot of similarities between different charts and different patterns. So I don't think it's a wise thing. In my opinion, I don't feel it's smart to look at it and say, oh, they're copying each other or they're running the same algorithm. Ultimately, if you're running down into a distribution, it's going to look pretty similar on almost any chart. And if you're running into a distribution, mark down, mark up, they're all going to look kind of the same. Distribution, accumulation, they're all going to look kind of the same. So, well, there you go. Big sell-off on GME. It's funny. So it looks like your hedge funds are getting out. I mean, I think that's probably more likely than not. They're going to see if they can push it through. Look, anything that can be done here to like cause retail to like panic, I think is going to be done. I do see this as a creek drop, so that's not the best. So if you don't see that recovery ASAP, it's going to be bad. Same with AMC, although AMC is still kind of hovering around that 558 level. It could probably come as low as 548 and it would be fine. Same deal. It's kind of like looks meant to look like a distribution, I think. Let me get closer. All he has to do is come on and say like, I like the stock, and it's probably going to be, a ton of people buying. So not a big deal. This might just be people trying to get out of the play. Hard to say. I didn't think I was going to stream during this. I might pull it up on my other screen, but I'm not going to stream his stuff because I think that would be really unwise because of the legality of it. Streaming someone else's stream doesn't seem like a good idea. 500,000 people waiting for him to come on. Oh man, this is going to crash my internet. I don't know, y'all. I kind of didn't want to do it. I might have to just like peace out because I'm not sure this is going to work out. Yeah, this target's a little lower. It's $34. I said 35, but I think it's more like 34.50. So GME is suspended, halted. Yeah, how far did it move? I mean, it dropped 7%, probably in a matter of seconds, so it was less than, it can't drop like a certain percentage in a certain amount of time. So you have to be mindful. I know people want to say everything is like illegal, but there are rules. I mean, you can go look at them about percentage over time. So I don't know if this is breaking that rule. Kind of looks like an inversion of this move, though. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. No, I wouldn't even bother trying to look at the chat. That's a waste of time, energy. It might even be better just to hide it. There's no reason to even look at it. So, well, he's either casually late or he's not coming. Because I'm not seeing anybody on here. I would just turn the chat off. There's no point. What are you going to read on that chat anyways? You know? No one's going to say anything productive. It's just going to be like a constant stream of people screaming about buying and holding and all that stuff. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just mean that's the way it's going to be. So, institutional interns, yeah. Well, AMC's not halted, and AMC's sold back down to that level that I was hoping for, which is the 548. Not a huge fan of the price action on the whole because it went above 570. That to me looks like a distribution model. So they may be just jerking everybody's chain, trying to get everyone to get hyped up and then think it's going to keep running and then it just dumps. Yeah, maybe. I'm going to check something on AMC real quick. Yeah, okay. Yep. Yeah, all right. So they've generated like a channel down. And when I say I'm talking about like institutional players. Those are the ones I'm kind of concerned about at the moment. For lack of a better word, manipulating the stock in order to kind of screw over retail. And you can see that double tap on the top of that channel. That's apparent at this point. This is such a waste of time on a Friday. 5% in 5 minutes. I don't know. That sounds, I think it's less than that. I think it's like at a ratio or something. Oh, okay. That's weird. That was weird. The whole internet crashed. The internet around the world died. Now is AMC halted too? No. And it looks like it's trying to sell back down through that 548. I mean, in theory, it could come back to the creek. I just wanted it to hold that support level. So this is nothing particularly unusual just yet. Now, if it drops this support level, I'm going to be a little bit more bearish all of a sudden. There is a trend, but you don't want to lose that trend. It looks like they're trying to dump it. So, classic pump and dump. here. Get everybody excited, get them buying in, and dump the stock, rug pull, like crazy hard. It could be people trying to get out of put positions really fast. You know, like let's instigate a sell-off, get out of these put positions where this dude comes on and jacks the price up. That would be smart. I don't know if he's coming, guys. I'll tell you what, I'm going to turn off mine. I know it's quote-unquote history, but you have the ability to go watch it. I'm not going to watch it because it's causing my screen to lag, and I'm stock trading, so I don't want to be in a position where I'm getting screwed because of a bad connection. Yeah, sorry. My bottom line is more important for me than watching a roaring kitty thing. If he comes on, I'm sure it's going to make a difference, and if he doesn't, it's probably going to make a difference as well. I'll tell you this much, if it's a hoax and he puts it up, he doesn't put it up, and he ends up not showing up, it's not going to be good. It's not a positive thing. So we got a creek test here. That's something. I'm not really seeing any kind of evidence that it can't still move. It's above the creek, which is always a positive. I think it's holding. Volatility is going a little crazy today. I'm just thinking. I don't know why I did this. Should have just exited my positions and let it be. This isn't kind of the stuff I really want to trade. I don't know, man. We're kind of looking at it from a... Yeah, there's the buy in. It's the same deal. I mean, you can see the movement on AMC a little bit better. It's really the same movement, which is a sell down towards the creek, buy back in. I would say GME has gone considerably low, but it looks like it jumped back above here. So it went down to like a steeper creek and support. I mean, 33.50 is one of the fib levels, so higher lows is not a bad thing. I'm a little concerned because it didn't make a higher low than 34.20. I don't know, man. People think he's some kind of a lowercase God, and I don't really feel like that's ever wise to put that kind of emphasis on a single person. I'm impressed by the stuff that he's been able to do and accomplish, and for the market, I think there's absolutely like a place for people like that to be remembered and to be used as examples and blah, 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 blah of what people can accomplish. I don't think he's out to mess with anybody. I really don't. That's not what I'm saying either. I'm just saying, like, the fact that there's 500,000 people waiting for this person to pump their stock, and that's the way they see it, it's kind of messed up. Period. I mean, whether or not he does it or doesn't do it, just in general, this very strange phenomena we're experiencing. So I'm curious, but I'm also not like super married to any position right now. So I think if we're going to advance, this is kind of it. You really don't want to see it continually break down here. You need to see it bottom out somewhere, maybe around the creek here, and then push up. And ultimately, it already did a little bit of a peak to test above 570 again. What bothers me about this is it's a parallel move. So like when I look back at it, I'm like, oh, well, that's not good, because if you dump it now, you're probably going to head down to 5 like almost immediately. You see that pattern on that channel? It's definitely looks to me like it's trying to build out, you know, and trying to advance. But I think if it fails, I mean, 5 is definitely in the target here. You can see it really clearly here on this intersection. So I'm in some $6 calls in the event that it moves. Those got kind of crushed on this move. Entered a little too early thinking that this was support, and I should have waited because I knew it needed to come back down to 548. I just had it in my gut. I should have waited for support there. But I also am in put positions as well. So this might be institutions just kind of calling a bluff, like thinking that he's not going to get on. So has he jumped on yet? Anyone can tell me that? As I left the stream, it was killing my computer. Oh, well, mine said he was starting at 11, so yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you that what, I'm not going to give it infinite amount of time here. Personally, I got stuff to do, so I'm going to watch the stock, but I'm not going to stream much longer if he's not on and we don't see anything. Yeah, I think this is a breakdown, and we've got localized potential for a turn. And if it doesn't, I think you're going to see a drop and a hook here. And if I see a drop and a hook, I ain't sitting in any calls. I don't care what happens after. It doesn't matter. If this happens, I'm done for now. I think you get that dump here, it's going to be pretty bad. And I'm seeing this as like a double top downward. I'm just not really seeing a strong case for upside unless this can advance beyond like 565 again. It's a trap. Admiral Akbar. If somebody had done that and like pretended to be him, that would be horrible. I'm pretty sure it's his legit account though, so I don't think he's ever changed it. So that would be really weird, you know, to have somebody like come in and change it for nothing. This could just be, again, people kind of repositioning and trying to get out of stuff. I don't know. I might just trade out of my puts. They're up like 20%. I might just sell them. Just to get out of another trade here. And, oh, okay. No, they're not up 20%. They're shaking out like crazy. I'll see if I can get a good deal on them. Sure. I'll just set a limit order. Maybe it triggers, maybe it doesn't. So I got June 21st, 4.5 puts. I might only get out of a couple of them if they trigger early, and I might keep a couple. It was just a simple little swing for me. Nothing too crazy here. So it's me just kind of reading the room and knowing that there was going to be a lot of volatility today. Entering into those put positions seemed like kind of a no-brainer to me. But I can understand why you might not want to play that way right now either, because with the roaring kitty thing, it's like, well, don't you think it's just gonna rip? I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, and if this is a shakeout, fine. I can take advantage of that. You know. Use the downside, make some money, and then potentially use the upside and make some money, depending on what happens. But I do know that Max Payne was at 5 for AMC. I see a target in mind on this cross if it fails to advance. So there's a really small window here of opportunity. Maybe we see some wedge action until later in the day, and then it drops, So I'm not trying to like rush the trade either, but profit's profit. Let's zoom in a bit. Yeah, it's kind of doing this really rapid fire bottoming action type deal. I might get kind of screwed out of my position here if I can't get out. Bummer. Okay, well, I filled with a little bit of profit. That's good. I didn't trade very much. 39 cents to 48 cents. 10-cent increase is not bad for a simple little daily move. Could get way bigger later. I didn't get out of all of them. I kept one. I like to keep a runner just for fun. You guys are like, that's not fun. Well, like the position itself isn't, it's not super short term. I mean, I got a couple weeks. So if it didn't work out with one of them, I've got time. And I already made profit, so I don't really care if it, I wouldn't say I wanted to go to zero, but I wouldn't really care that much if it didn't work out. Now my calls, on the other hand, those are in a different position right now. Like they're looking pretty flattened down. So if I don't see those go soon, I'm not going to be waiting around all day for this guy to show up. You guys are like, what? My assumption was that we probably would get some kind of crazy action before, and then it would probably at least tempt a move up. I don't know if he doesn't show up what that results in. You know what I mean? And frankly, like this just looks like a setup for a sell down that might react. So I'm kind of waiting to see if we get the reaction. And if we don't get it, we don't get it. I mean, it's that simple. I'm not going to just sit here and hope against hope. So I'm not going to lose a bunch of money. So again, I don't know if he's on yet. Nah, is he still not on? I mean, it would be expected that it would probably go pretty fast. So what I'm thinking right now is that this is a push down ahead of Roaring Kitty in order to get out of some positions and just kind of do a sell down really quick and see if they can shake some folks out. And then I think the idea would be probably some kind of a secondary upthrust motion. I don't necessarily think it's super bullish long term. I think there's a possibility we can see this thing rip to like 6, but honestly, if it got back up to just above 592, I'd probably be comfortable exiting some of my position, because at that point, you might have a backup that then runs, and so you can, see that as a possibility. But then you also might have just a dump, What I'm seeing on the technical setup right here is that they've generated a creek that's really low. It jumped over, it didn't check it, and if you were going to go down towards it, you'd probably head down to sub 520 in order to kind of get there. And then ultimately, like, I can easily see how this could bleed all the way down to 5 today. So on the whole, if he doesn't show up, there it is. I'm thinking like I'm not going to hold anything because I think this is just ridiculous, you know. Like, it's a stupid way to trade. And I probably shouldn't have done it. And I'll probably be a lot happier today if I don't waste my time with this. Because, yeah. I think they're trying to like dump it down as quickly as they can. The longer it goes on, the more people are going to sell. I don't like playing games, so the longer that he doesn't go on, the more likely it is that this is going to continue to drop. So no bueno. Not a fan of that. All right. About 5 more minutes, okay? So same deal. I'm going to trim my positions back quite a bit. I'm not happy with the if this pops back up because I'm not happy with this. Oh, okay. Well, there we go. You guys are like, wow, that he must have just got on. And we're halted. This is bonkers, huh? I don't even know what to do here. Like, how do you even trade this? Like, there's no way. Like, how do you even trade something like this? I don't even know. Well, I'm glad I exited all my puts, except for one. I'm okay with keeping one. I'm not okay with keeping them all. Is this real life right now? Is this happening? I was literally seconds away, guys. Like, seconds away. This is madness. I should not even have to be doing this right now, like at all. I think institutions are going to seriously screw over a lot of people regardless of what happens. I was like seconds away. I don't think you guys understand. I had like all the orders set up. I was getting ready to click the button. And now they're up a lot. So I don't know what to tell you. I'm not really happy that that happened, but I mean, I'm glad I got out of those puts when I did. I had kept one of them, but I don't really care. I already had kind of scratched on them. They're up 100% all of a sudden, those $6 calls. Give me a break. I'm never going to be able to trade out of this. I'm just going to set some limit orders, I guess. How do you even trade this? I don't know. Are we just going to gap up infinitely? I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just set a couple orders because I don't have like a lot of surety about any of this, so I'm just going to set some orders and see what hits. My average is pretty high. It's already like 90 cents, so I don't know what to do. I guess I'll just sell them off and try to do like 10-cent increments or 20-cent increments or something. And just see what hits. I mean, theoretically, if it did just kind of squeeze here, you could see this go really, really far, really fast. But I don't know what's going to happen. A halt could bring about anything. You could have a massive sell-off all of a sudden. You know? Yeah, I'm just going to do 20-cent increments. I don't know what else to do. Maybe you guys have another plan, but it's a Friday. Like, I'm probably not going to hold any. Maybe one. Again, just for kicks. Don't do it, Booksy. They're going to be worth $5 a piece. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I really don't know what to expect. There's a big fat candle and then nothing. Why is there no candle on GME? It just never got unhalted? I don't know. Why not? All right. I'm going to just shoot for the stars on some of these. And just see if it can get filled. That'd be nice. Wouldn't that be something? You guys are like, what are you doing? Look, I don't know what's going to happen. So instead of me trying to like roll the dice and just see, I'm going to see if some of these early ones hit. And then what I'm going to do is trade out of them slowly over increasing increments. So I'm doing like a parabolic thing. So I've got like, I bought them for like 90 cents. I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing because it's halted. There's nothing to really see anyways until it unhalts. I bought them for like 90 cents. Okay. That's pretty high. I don't like getting options for that high, but they're very short term. So they're like a week out. They could be extremely volatile if this opens up and they're like $1 or something, right? So I'm doing one at like 110, then I'm doing one at like 140, and then I'm doing one at like 2. And then from there, I don't know. We'll just see what happens. But I also think, again, like there could be a lot of people dumping on the stock. So I want to be really careful. About this move today. And I'm actually going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to set a limit order for my puts because I think there's going to be some serious thrashing about of price here for a minute. And it's probably, oh man. So that was an up thrust to the this level, which was that previous creek level we talked about. And I said that's kind of the one I would look at is if it came above there and didn't hold.
Could I have
one? Yeah. That could be kind of wild. What is happening right now? I don't even know what the heck's going on. These options are just going bonkers. I can't even like track them. Well, my calls actually dumped the other way, so that's not good. He's got to know that it's gonna. That's a crazy little gap up. He's got to know that it's gonna do something like that. You're gonna have a sell wall here, and then on AMC, you're gonna have a sell wall here. So, yeah. What a mess. May have lost it. No, I'm not glad now. I'm not glad I stayed. They're getting trashed. This volatility is like wrecking everything. I've hit none of my orders at all. I think I went for the moon and just I'm gonna miss it. I'm more likely to gonna get my puts at this point. Pretty close. I mean, it kind of did the same thing that we've seen previously. Like, this just looks like a quadruple flush to me. Like, it did this move where, look, it went above the top and then it went down below the bottom, you know? It looks like it's trying to advance down, not up at the moment. But that's because the move up went lower and the move down went, excuse me, the move up didn't go as high and the move down went lower. Could it be a spring action? Possibly. I still think this could be just a complete and total dump here if we're not careful. Yeah, I'm kind of irritated. I don't know. I guess it's my choice, you know. You can choose whether or not you want to trade it or not. I just wish I had kind of gotten out. But there's not much you can do once it halts. You're just kind of stuck. You know? Like, there's really nothing you can do. It either goes or it doesn't when it's unhalted. And GME's halted again. It's hooking right now. It looks like it's trying to hook beneath the... I would say this. It doesn't really matter if it goes or not. It seems to me that institutional traders have already set up the walls where they want them here, and that you've got pretty clear and defined attempts here to try to like drop the price. If it hooks here and drops, it's going to probably have some serious continuation. That's a lot of volume on the sell side after that single candle. I know you're thinking, well, dude, maybe that's just all the weak hands getting out and then it's going to rocket. Maybe. This reminds me a lot of like a bottom in the way that it's moving, but the lower lows are not making me feel good, and the lower highs are not making me feel good. It's not about it being a flag or not at that point. To me, it's like, well, it just pushed above the flag and then dropped back down into it, you know. We're basically forming out like a widening then. We can get rid of that. It hit this trend, you know, that was met. So that one's kind of done for now. You know, there's just a lot of things here that are, I think were designed to kind of mislead everybody. Yeah. And I'll say this, where is the volume, you know? Like, there's no volume right now on AMC after that big drop. There's no buy-in. I mean, you can say like it's getting absorbed or something, but this is not heavy volume stuff. It just looks like a secondary upthrust right now, to me anyways. So I'm not trying to be downer on it. It's just like if the people were really behind this and wanting to like move it, you should have 100 million volume, you know what I mean? Like out of nowhere kind of thing, just kind of pushing, and I'm not sure. Flip-flopping. I don't know. I kind of just want to like trade out of my position and be done with it. This is too stressful for me. He's still not said anything. Is he just sitting there? It really won't matter. They call it like a publicity stunt if he doesn't say anything. And people that love him will defend it, and people that don't like him will attack it. It's funny, like to me it just kind of looks like a rapid fire build out of what we thought would maybe happen anyways earlier today. It's almost like it just sped through the setup or something. He's giving his thesis now. That's good. He needs to say something. I'll watch it later when I have time to like sit there and digest it properly. Well, I didn't get anything out of that at all. And it definitely went through my orders, but did not get them. They didn't fill. It went all the way up to $1.20. It wicked up through it. My calls, I mean. I didn't get a single order filled. So, and I know that I had it. I don't know. I think I'm at my loss point now, so might have to just take it. Move on with my day. I mean, I made money on those puts, but I had a little bit heavier on the call side, so oh man, it's just dumping. Yeah, I'm at my stop loss, so all right, I'm gonna be done. It is what it is. I'm not holding through it anymore. It's not like shares, it's different. Even if this did recover, there's not much I can do. When you hit your limit, you hit your limit, so that's my limit. Yeah, maybe with this kind of price action, you could get like a recovery as a even atom kind of bottom, but I'm seeing that a little bit here, but it also kind of just looks like a cliff. So, and I don't really have any other way to read this. There's a bit of a mild divergence on 1 minute. They're just dumping it along this trend. So even the atom bottom here, if I were to play it, it really runs this way like that. So it's not like kind of ignoring that bigger move. That bottom would only take you back above here at 530 and maybe back up. Maybe back up one more time to this guy up here at like 550. So I'm thinking that 550 is where it's going to hit the potentially come back up if it does have a recovery. So my other put filled at decent amount. So my puts were fine. My puts were super profitable. They're fine. I didn't go as heavily. I mean, technically I had the same number of them, but because they're farther out and they were cheaper, I didn't have as much invested in them. So from a monetary perspective, they didn't do as well. They wouldn't have countered it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really see a silver lining to this right now. I think I should have just read the chart as I wanted to read it. Because this to me looks like an upthrust, and I'm not really seeing a silver lining except for the possibility of this being like a creek retest, early creek retest that could somewhat recover. I don't see it coming past 550 again though, unless just really rocks your socks off kind of thing, you know. So the problem is that it already did a distributive action here. So like at this point, there's really no precedence for even coming back up to 540 from a technical standpoint. Like you could do it, but it would just be like another test at the same level. I'm looking at the bigger picture and I'm thinking that probably it's not that complicated. Like it just dropped the it just dropped the parallel, and not only that, but it looks like it's trying to drop the other trend. So it's just really selling down. This is a little more like what GME was looking like. I think it dipped down low. So GME kept its downtrend. Yeah, and yet people think that this stock isn't controlled by institutions. You want to see market manipulation, you look at institutional traders, you know, taking advantage. I don't even know what this is. I don't know why this is out here. Oh, that's this one. That one's gone. That's a bit of a hook action. Yeah, we should have known right here because it dropped the creek. It did not hold, and all this is just a UT. I said if it came back above 38.45, you'd want to be really careful because it could UT, and that's exactly what it did. It just upthrust and then dumped it right there. There's really nothing quite like technical analysis. It's pretty amazing. I don't know about this marker. I'm not sure where I got that from. I think it was just an indication of the trend. Like it's just a simple waveform cross. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that like this is probably where they take advantage of it and drive it down to like 5, and they did. It's ugly, right? Does not look good. I don't see it easily recovering here. I could see a move maybe when he's done. It's kind of like the Gary Gensler effect or whatever. Maybe when he's done, having it kind of recover back up. Again, like a false rally to kind of give people like a sense that it's going to recover. And everybody will be like, it's going to go to the moon. You know what I mean? And I think that's a possibility. I don't think it's likely going to go to the moon. Geez, they just absorbed all the buy orders and then just dragged it down into the pits. It's so simple to read. I should have just listened to my gut. Because I mean, even if you were gonna, I mean, look at this. Jeez Louise, folks. Like, even if you were gonna, even if you were gonna play this to the bull side, you would have been smarter to have just waited for that move down. You know, I knew it was gonna happen, and you could just visually, you could just see it happening. The setup, that push up above 570. It was so obvious. And then there's the up thrust again to go a little higher to drive the price low to get to your low target. I know. I'm trying to get out of a position and then I'll be done, okay? All right? Okay. Yeah, so nothing that happened with this Roaring Kitty thing went, I mean, a lot of it went south, but nothing really happened here that went beyond the reaches of technical analysis. That's going to be my summary statement, because everything here happened in a way that even set up beforehand, absorbing the buying, preparing for the sell-off. They prepared for this. They drive the price back through the creek, and then they had a rapid upthrust, absorbed those buy orders, and then sold hard through probably into retail hands, you know. And then we saw the waveform cross. All that's required is a distribution here to bring it back down. I mean, it hit the widening like perfectly. I mean, there's just nothing about this that looks uncontrolled. So that's to be expected. I think I was ambitious, thinking that we might get a bigger push if it held. When this happened, I should have been looking for the upthrust, and I wasn't sure if we were going to see that support, and it just dumped it. This would have been the time to just kind of exit quickly and get out. Now we're just going to see rebounds, and maybe, you know, maybe we'll get like a kind of a reactive move back up, since it was a really big push down. That might be expected to kind of see it sort of hit the low, bounce, and then get a reaction. So I just look at like retraces from here. Yeah, and then the bottom, if you look at the creek below, we already tested it, but it's up here. I could see us coming back up today and maybe getting, I'm doubtful it would go all day, but I think a mild reaction back up to either the floor at 530 or maybe this area around 536. That's about all I would hope for here, personally. Now, a terminal shakeout isn't out of the question, and you can get a terminal shakeout with this kind of a downward motion through the bottom of a range. So if by some chance this did come up and found support above 527, big if by chance that happens, then you will see potentially a massive move up. In a terminal shakeout, it's like a V-shaped recovery. So in that terminal shakeout, you would see it turn back up at about the same velocity that it came down. So again, it's a big if question, because technically at this point, I could see it as already broken down in this channel. But if the goal here is just simply to play the up and down, maybe as fast as 77 degrees up, and then there's a slower one here. This is 50 degrees, so it jumped over that. So let's use this one, 56. This is just on my chart. So yeah, maybe as rapid fire as that. And then that's the only kind of bullish situation I can see right here is a terminal shakeout. That's what it's called. And it has to have like a V-shaped recovery. It's like a rapid fire dump with heavy volume that then goes to really light volume and it pumps all the way back up and finds support. Any other kind of motion here, if you hook right here at 520, if you hook up here at 538, all of those things are going to be bearish in the end if you then have continuation, because there's really nowhere to go except back down to 5 here into the end of the day. So I can easily see this doing that, where you sort of get this chop back down and then lo and behold, you end up around 5 at the end of the day here. And frankly, there's like kind of a number of things that could happen, but this seems fairly likely to me. Yeah, I think the V-shaped recovery is pretty unlikely because you'd have to see it move above 530 and then immediately come back up and go above 570 and hold. So you'd have to see this like very, very fast rapid fire movement over the course of like an hour or an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe at most. And that's about it. So I'm not really seeing any volume here. I mean, I'm seeing buyers, but I'm seeing a lot of stopping power. He did a little skit to start, and he's talking about Cohen and confidence in management. Bro's yapping about nothing. He inferred that he came back to disprove the theory that the person tweeting for RK was someone else, basically confirming that he is in fact back. That's it. Okay. Well, I'm actually going to stop. So what I'm going to do is I gave you guys some levels to look at here for possible recovery and then possible rejection. I don't really feel like there's much else to go off of right now. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Like I was pretty sure we were going to hit that low spot here. We went below 5. We went to like, what is this? 492. That's going to be something we'll have to mark off. If it's a terminal move, you're going to come all the way back up above 570, and you're going to then find support and run. If it's just a breakdown, which is kind of what it looks like, it's just like a rapid fire drop, sell off, and then you're going to hook. I don't see us coming back up above 540. So that kind of stuff is sort of hard to judge. I mean, terminal moves are terminal moves. It's exactly what they sound like. They're meant to incite fear. They're very, very rapid. They're extremely volatile. It's really all about all you can say about them, really. You can go look them up. Go look up terminal shakeout, terminal spring for Wyckoff. That's pretty much your only hope here if you're a bull. Otherwise, to me, it just looks like we're just channeling. So I could see us kind of spitting it out. Now I'm looking back at this, it kind of looks like a 50% for the whole move, doesn't it? For this kind of widening down. So pinning it beneath that 50% would be an easy way to ensure that you get the $5 max pain. So if the goal was to sort of prevent further, he might show his positions. If the goal is the goal is just to keep you down to 5 for max pain, this is probably what you'll see is a pinning beneath this mid creek here. And then, I don't know. I mean, everything else is kind of whatever at this point. We hit the target that we were looking at here with this. I should have just read the room. And I did, I just didn't trade it right. I got the puts profitable, but I think the calls got thrashed, and I wasn't able to capitalize. I had orders that should have been hit. They just didn't get hit. They didn't get filled, which just means there weren't enough people buying them. So yeah, I mean, like I was saying, like even Atom kind of bottom that could work out. When I look at the RSI here, I'm on the 1 minute, so there's a really small time frame. But when I look at the RSI, I could see the double M here. There's the cat ear thing. Oh, look, it's that pattern again. You guys are like, I hate this pattern, Booksy. Yeah, I know. But what this would need to look like is essentially in order to advance, you basically just have to jump the local creek. Notice that we're doing it really low, and that's not really a positive. It doesn't give me a lot of confidence in a big move up because we're doing it way down here, and this is already kind of working its way out, so being kind of gamed, if you will. So that's kind of what we're looking at for like a creek jump. According to the RSI. So if this finds support here, you should see a push up again, and then you'll have a bit of upside for a while. Hard to say how far it goes on just singular moves here, but should move up to at least here, and that's going to give you, yeah, if it's strong, that's what should happen. You get across, and then you can do it again here, probably about the 50. And if this is successful and it's bullish, that's when you're really going to see a bigger move. This is where you could potentially come way up again. And I don't know how long that takes. I'm just kind of throwing this out here. But that's about the only place I could see us maybe making a move back up. So if this breaks down here and it can't hold, yeah, it's not looking good. You're setting up like a really low angle approach. See that? Super low. So GME is down 35% now. So really, really dropped. I mean, this whole thing just reeks of like head and shoulder. I don't know, guys. I mean, it's lost now at this point. It's lost this this creek, so I'm not gonna lie. I'm kind of glad I got out of most of my positions, all of my option positions yesterday. I tried to play this volatility and I didn't play it right. So this is like a throwback 786 retracement. Just no stopping power, no strong stopping power from buyers there. So right on that intersection, right there, I mean, it couldn't be more precise than that. I should have kept my puts, man. I got out too early. I got out with profit on them, but man, I got out too early. Yeah, no, I'm not seeing a likely V-shaped recovery here. I think we're going to see it boil out to like this kind of a pattern, but it's looking really flat. So all that means is that you might have it kind of lingering a little more today. I do think we're going to come back to some upside point. It's starting to look less and less likely it's going to be just this really strong recovery. So just really taking advantage of that to drop stuff. I'm pretty disappointed. I think this was to be expected, you know? Like at the end of the day, I was pretty aware that there was going to be a lot of volatility and that we probably hit the 5 today, so I think it was a mistake to try to trade this, you know. And then the rest of the day will be like volatility crush or something. So even if you get the rebound, it's going to be like really weak sauce. The only real thing I could see here is just a really violent turn. That's the only thing I can see is like maybe the sellers are exhausted quickly and then you go. But I'm pretty sure it just made another low after the selling climax. It's a double bottom. Maybe. All right. So at this juncture, what I'm going to do is, so it didn't follow that steep trajectory out. It looks like a 50-50 around this other one. So what I'm going to do is kind of take a look here. This is what I'm going to leave you guys with today. So there's some creeks on the 1 minute RSI that are pretty easy to follow with that pattern we talk about, and then this guy coming down is probably just a trend. So if it's a trend breakout, that is what it looks like to me. You should see it reverse, yeah. That's where you're going to get that kind of upside move. Previous bottom here is up at 527 on my chart, so I'm not. That's kind of my estimation of it, and I think that's because it's a fib level that it looks like it's slightly off. Might be just because it didn't quite hit it right. So I think it's possible we get back to 527 today in a bearish scenario, and then maybe come back down end of day. So come back up, sell off again, come back down. That's kind of best case scenario for the bears if you're bearish and you think it's going to stay at 5, but you still want it to come back up. The only event this thing runs is if it really moves hard back to above 530. So yeah, and I can't put a lot of confidence in that right now. Things could change. They do change pretty rapidly. One more thing before I go. Someone was accusing me earlier of not looking at EMAs enough on higher time frames, but I do. And I mean, this is like the 15 minute, and we're right on it right now. And that's not the highest time frame, but when you go back to the hourly, I'm not really sure I see the cause here for being super bullish. The hourly is way below us. We did test it, and we're staying above it. That's positive. So it's still bullish, but like, you can come back down and check it at any time. And that's way low. It's in the 460s right now. So that's kind of like some of those targets we had coming down on these cross trends. That's not really giving me a strong case of like, oh, it's gonna run, you know. The 4 hour is kind of the one that's probably the most critical right now. I expected it to be around 450 and it's about 481. This is the level at 45 that we were having issues with, and it shifted down. So at this point, yeah, it looks like we haven't quite tested it. We're kind of going down towards it. I mean, that's a massive candle on the 4 hour. So that's a big one. So that's right below us. The daily is nowhere near us. It's still way above us somewhere. I don't even know where it is, but it wasn't close before, so it's way up here at like 956. Again, it gives a cause or a possible case for like a run up to like the 786 to retest and build out some kind of reaccumulation. So I'd say like the 4 hour and daily look good. And everything else looks kind of so-so or not good. In terms of EMA and RSI, they're kind of the only places where you don't really have topping. It's not topped off and pointing down. All right. Well, guys, I got to get going. Best of luck today. You know, do your best. Be patient. And I'll try to catch up with y'all later.